And at 10, Firebrand. A superpowered enforcer for Justin Hammer, Firebrand is a former activist who turned to violence after believing peaceful protest produced no results. Which sounds awfully familiar now thanks to the Flag Smasher's introduction, Falcon and the Winter Soldier. First appearing in Iron Man Volume 1 number 27 from 1970, Gary Gilbert was born in Detroit, Michigan. Gary wore a suit with an armored exoskeleton that gave him superhuman strength and resistance to fire. It also housed flamethrowers, which allowed him to shoot out, fire and thermal blasts from his hands, one mounted on each wrists, and flying jets that gave him the ability to fly, which I'm pretty sure sounds familiar at this point. Except with the Flag Smashers having already been introduced and no Iron Man remaining in the MCU as a counter, Firebrand making an appearance seems a little far-fetched. It's still entirely possible, perhaps this version gets inspired by the Flag Smashers and maybe Peter or someone has to end up dealing with them, but it would be on a much smaller scale since with all the movements, Marvel could be worried about upsetting people, and I don't think that they would handle, I don't know how they would handle this one. And at 9, Spy Master. First introduced in Iron Man number 33 in 1971, the original Spy Master was leader of the Espionage Elite, and they were a formidable opponent for Iron Man, and successfully infiltrated Stark Industries on more than one occasion. Man, it's like Star Labs, you just walk in the front door. He's also evaded Iron Man's grasp multiple times. After his operative Mark Sharon was killed by the Ghost while using the Spy Master identity, the original Spy Master just let the world believe that he was dead. Others have attempted to assume the role as Spy Master, but none really did all that well. Years later, he returned to action after being found by Norman Osborn, but quickly returned to the shadows. He owned a supervillain club, and when the Avengers left Earth in order to battle the Builders, he gathered a group of supervillains and then broke in Stark Tower to steal Iron Man's technology, because the tower was basically defenseless. And while this could be plausible, seeing how Iron Man is dead so his compound would remain partially unguarded, I don't think that the MCU is going to go this route, even if the character has been around for 50 years. It was actually 50 years this January, which is kinda nuts. And at 8, Blizzard. Dr. Gregor Shapanka, PhD, was an employee of Stark Industries. He was conducting private research into a means of achieving physical immortality when first introduced in Tales of Suspense number 45 in 1963. However, he attempted to rob a private vault of Anthony Stark so he could obtain microtransistor designs that Shapanka had intended to sell to further finance his research because, he was trying to be immortal. And that's what everyone does when they want to be immortal. However, he was caught and unsuccessful because, it was stupid. I guess he didn't have the Thieves Guild training like I do. I'd show the tattoo, but I have a full sleeve on and a suit, so I can't really, but still. Anyway, he was brought before Stark, who then fired him, understandably, because, he tried to steal from him. Subsequently, Shapanka also created a suit that could generate intense cold, which he had hoped to slow his own aging process. He then started using the suit and its abilities to commit crimes in order to, get more money to fund more research, because, everyone needs that villain. Doc Ock, Jack Frost. Well, the news media had called this new criminal Jack Frost, which is an insult to the man who played Jack Frost in The Santa Claus 3, who also played Mr. Honeywell on How I Met Your Mother. Anyway, he later changes his name from Jack Frost to Blizzard, and eventually the suit comes into the hands of Donnie Gill, who assumes the title in 1987 after Gregor's death in The Amazing Spider-Man Annual number 20 in 1986. And at 7, Crimson Dynamo. Technically, in a sense, Crimson Dynamo was already introduced into the MCU. However, his actual name of Anton Vanko was introduced to the MCU as the father of Whiplash, which I think just proves my point alone as to why Crimson Dynamo is too powerful for the MCU. First introduced in Tales of Suspense number 46 in 1963, the Crimson Dynamo's armor was equipped with an array of miniature electrical generators that allowed him to generate and manipulate electrical fields for a variety of effects, including but not limited to electrical blasts, electrical override, and a disruptor field that could be used to scramble electronic devices. Wonderful. The character was so strong that they had to make a new character named Ivan and make him Whiplash, who was introduced into the comics in Iron Man vs. Whiplash, but in the comics, he was also named Anton Vanko, with no relation to the Crimson Dynamo. It's confusing as hell. And at 6, Titanium Man. First introduced in Tales of Suspense number 69, nice. From 1965, not as nice, Boris Bolsky quickly rose through Soviet government ranks and became popular in the Communist Party. He had also briefly worked with Black Widow as an intelligence agent, but due to political reasons, he was assigned to Serbia. He learned that some of the camp members were scientists that had worked with Anton Vanko, who, as I mentioned last number, was the Crimson Dynamo. So Bolsky planned to make a new armor set capable of defeating Iron Man to prove the USSR's superiority over the US, because of course that's why. A titanium alloy armor was made, however, and it was much larger and heavier than Iron Man's, due to the camp lacking sufficient resources to design micro components. Because, Tony Stark built this in a cave! with a pile of scraps. Polsky was unable to defeat Iron Man on several occasions. However, I don't think this character would be introduced because they already made reference to him in the first Iron Man movie, where Stark made his suit a gold titanium alloy, which I thought was funny since people were calling him Iron Man, but in reality it was gold titanium alloy man. But like, you know, that line now makes more sense with this. Plus, Tony's dead, so I don't think they could want to beat Iron Man unless they go after like Pepper Potts or something.
Number 5. Onslaught. Making his first debut in X-Men issue 15, Onslaught was a sentient psionic entity created from the minds of Charles Xavier and Magneto. So when the X-Men were fighting the Acolytes, Wolverine hit Magneto, and then in turn Magneto ripped the adamantium from his bones, which I've mentioned on other lists before because that's one of the more painful encounters I've ever seen in comic books. His healing factor then had to work overtime, and Xavier at this point decided it would be the right move to just shut Magneto's mind down, so then he made him catatonic. But during this exact moment, all of Magneto's lust for hate and violence leaked into Charles' subconscious, creating this new personality, Onslaught. Onslaught is quite lucky, because now he gets to tap into the psychic resources of the astral plane where he can manipulate matter and energy. I mean, let's get X-Men into the MCU first, and then we'll start talking about evil mashups and swaps. Number 4. Mojo. Making his first debut in Longshot issue 3, Mojo is known for using Earth as forms of TV entertainment for the universe. Just like the team over here at Top 10 Nerd, the more views he gets for this interdimensional TV show, the more powerful he gets as well. So if you didn't hit that like button, now you really have to. So in the 1992 issue titled Mojo's Media Madness, he had this wild storyline where Mojo gets Rogue, Cyclops, Beast, and Wolverine, and they all think that they're characters from The Wizard of Oz. It sounds fun, but for the MCU this would be way too stupid, dare I say. The comic is crazy enough. I mean, we see his madness really unfold in X-Men issue 10. Mojo is a unique villain. He's part of a race called the Spineless Beings, and they're from a planet named after him called Mojo World inside of a pocket dimension called Mojoverse. It's just all about him, eh? Wow. So this race of spineless beings were also slowly going crazy over time because TV signals from other space-time continuums like ours were scattered into their timelines. He's a powerful sorcerer. We're not exactly sure just how far his magic can go. We'll stick to watching these guys on our TV rather than having them sucked into a interdimensional Netflix, you know? That sounds better. Number 3. Apocalypse. Making his first steps in Marvel graphic novel issue 17 and then making his first full appearance in X Factor issue 5, Apocalypse was born nearly 5,000 years ago at the edge of the Valley of the Kings in ancient Egypt. He was abandoned by his tribe because of the fact that he looked different. He had the Blue Man Group avatar vibe going on, so they left the child. How mean. Later on, he was raised by the nomads with the idea that only the strong survive. So already such a tragic childhood. Now in the desert, along came Baal of the Crimson Sands, leader of the Sandstormers, and he saw this kid crying and he also saw potential, because clearly he was different. So he named him Ansabanur, which translates to Morning Light. He grew up becoming the most feared in the land, and eventually Baal led him to Ramatut's time ship in an underground tomb. Now Baal didn't survive this cave expedition, but Nur was now determined to be anything but an abused worker. Now he wanted revenge on Ramatut, the pharaoh ruler. And after being thrown into a pit of snakes, Nur grew in size and strength, easily defeating all the guards before finally declaring himself Apocalypse. We had this guy already in the Foxverse, but it didn't feel too great. I think we should let that wound heal a bit before bringing him into the MCU with the X-Men. Maybe like 8 years, then we'll talk. Number 2, MODOK. Making its first appearance in Tales of Suspense issue 93, MODOK was created by Dr. George Tarleton. He had worked with the team recently to create the Cosmic Cube, but the scientist supreme, Lyle Getz, figured the next logical step was figuring out a way to understand the powers inside said cube. We see this happen a little bit in the MCU. So enter Project MODOK, yes, spelled with a C at the end instead of a K. That's important, you gotta remember that. MODOK stood for Mental Organism Designed Only for Computing. It sounds like a high-tech series, sounds perfect. What a great way to analyze and probe this cosmic cube. So they grabbed that scientist George that I mentioned and altered him into this big-headed supercomputer. That's when things start to go south, obviously. With a brain too big for his body, they had to give him a hover chair, which is referred to as the Doomsday Chair. Already it's downhill. This scientist did not know that with great power comes great responsibility, so it wasn't long before MODOK overtook his masters, changed that last letter from a C to a K, making his new, more suitable name for the list, MODOK, Mental Organism Designed Only for Killing. He's the big bad in the new Avengers game that's not too good, but it's still worth a play, and yes, he's as crazy as it sounds. And finally, number 1, Galactus. Wielder of the power cosmic, this one has to eat planets in order to survive. Yummy. We saw him in Fantastic Four, Rise of the Silver Surfer. Well, I mean, we saw a Cloud that sort of looked like him, I guess. Galactus, the Devourer of Worlds. Let's talk about him. The Great Destroyer made his first appearance in Fantastic Four issue 48. He's the sole survivor of the 6th incarnation of the multiverse. But originally he was a humanoid named Galan, born on a previous version of Earth called Planet Ta. It was a paradise whose civilization was much more advanced than any other in the universe at the time, which sounds quite lovely. But when the cosmos were soon ending the embodiment of the 6th infinity, the sentience of the multiverse approached Galan and merged with him. So now Galactus resides in the 7th iteration of his universe, which is home to our Earth 616. He's extremely powerful. He once ate all the Infinity Stones, so maybe we'll just keep them hidden in case he's off his desk for now, just to be safe. Guys, there you have it. Those are 10 villains too powerful for the MCU, but never say never.
But coming in at number 10, it's actually Superman. We're just gonna get this one out of the way now. Yes, Superman is practically unstoppable. On one hand, you've got what is probably the strongest, most durable guy in DC with a heart of gold and a strong moral compass. He's basically a god to us, but he is also one of the very first real superheroes to show up in comic books. The benchmark for what makes a hero a hero. If it's not his massive amounts of power and his strong will that keeps him in the fight, then it's his massive popularity. When DC had the death of Superman story, there was absolutely no way that Superman was gone forever. We've seen stories where he not only takes over the Earth, but stories where the Man of Steel lives until the absolute end of the universe itself. His own stories suffered because of the fact that he's just unbeatable. He's so damn powerful that nothing was a real challenge for him. Superboy Prime, essentially Superman without weaknesses, was one of the largest threats in the multiverse, and he went toe-to-toe with a Dr. Manhattan powered up Batman who laughs. Now I'm putting Superman at number 10 because he's a golden boy and he bothers me in a similar way to Captain America. I'm sorry. In at number 9 though is Orion. Orion is a new god and the son of Darkseid, and as a hero with a dark ancestry, he is quite the conflicted do-gooder. He has many forms and he has many abilities. He exists beyond the normal multiverse on a higher plane of existence called the Sphere of the Gods. Born on Apocalypse but adopted by the new gods of New Genesis, Orion is in a constant war with his inner darkness and with his father, Darkseid. Orion is repeatedly praised and stated to be a warrior with skill and ferocity second to none. While undercover on Apocalypse, he was their greatest warrior and would have slaughtered their entire army during training. He has held open the hand of the god of strength and might, who is threatening creation and ripping holes in reality with that strength. He stands against and fights a sun-amped up Superman one-on-one, something no one else in the Justice League was able to do, and he can tank star system destroying explosions. Orion moves with the speed of thought. His intelligence was enough that he created the Genesis box, which can destroy and rebuild a universe. He can grow to any size he wants, move through time, has a healing factor, super senses, and wields the Astro Force, which does a hell of a lot on top of everything else, but as an example, it once sealed holes in reality and knocked out Superman in a single shot. And that's all just Orion holding back and not using his true power called the Source of the Beast. But I think we can agree Orion is a beast here. Coming in at number 8, Martian Manhunter. I think it's incredibly easy to overlook Martian Manhunter's incredible capabilities. Yes, he is more well known for being a telepath and a shapeshifter, but this guy packs a hell of a punch with the Martian abilities of phasing, Martian vision, and density alteration. Now, his probably most powerful form was when he became Furnace, completely negating his weakness for fire. But Furnace was a villain and therefore cannot really be on this list. But in DC 1 Million, we get a John Johns who leads a war against Darkseid and gets him to surrender to the Source Wall, becoming trapped inside of it. The Source Wall, in return, gave John one wish. His wish was to become one with Mars, meaning John became a living planet while maintaining his multiversal telepathy and his genius intelligence. We don't get to see much of this version of John, but we can guess a lot of things about this version. Firstly, his weakness to fire is probably non-existent, because I mean, people gotta make fire on a planet to survive. We can also probably assume John keeps his other Martian abilities to a degree, and there's also the possibility that the passage of time has increased those natural abilities considering he's defeated Darkseid. We can also assume he would now also have the powers that usually come with being a living planet, like weather manipulation and control of the elements. He can control the sands of Mars to an incredible degree to do crazy things, so there's that. But in at number 7, Swamp Thing. Alec Holland was a scientist who, much like some other scientists, turned superhero when he was caught in a disaster. For Alec, it was an explosion. When he jumped away from the explosion, Alec was bathed in the chemical vats of the Louisiana swamps, and his memories were absorbed into the being known as Swamp Thing. Swamp Thing is an immortal creature who fights to protect the planet from threats to nature, including many supernatural villains. The Swamp Thing has complete mastery over all forms of plant life, and through this power, he is in constant communication with the very essence of the Earth, the green, and he serves as the plant elemental for the entire planet. In the past, Swamp Thing has gained access to other elemental powers, like at one point gaining control over earth, water, air, and fire, in addition to that of plant life. Theoretically, so long as there is plant life on planet Earth, Swamp Thing will always have a vehicle through which to house his consciousness, which makes him effectively immortal. He has basically revived himself countless times, just forming a new body out of plant life every time the current body can't keep going on, and he didn't even know he was doing this for the longest time. As a member of the Justice League Dark, Swamp Thing has been called on to help battle many supernatural threats over the years, and his recent TV show was hella underrated. Bring that shit back. Number 6, Captain Atom. Nathaniel Atom was transformed into Captain Atom in the 60s after being semi-forced to participate in a potentially fatal experiment sitting at ground zero of a nuclear explosion encased in an alien metal. Now, the explosion didn't actually kill him. What it did do was bond the alien metal to his flesh, giving him superpowers and throwing him 20 or so years forward into the present day. The alien metal gave him incredible abilities like flight, matter manipulation, energy manipulation, time manipulation, energy absorption, telepathy, spatial manipulation, quantum manipulation, force field creation, time travel, magic and mind manipulation, and control over the quantum field. These powers have let him perform some insane feats, like you can imagine, like creating a universe within the quantum field and later destroying that universe, fighting Superboy Prime, easily defeating a team composed of multiple versions of himself before absorbing them and creating an explosion powerful enough to destroy a universal space-time continuum. That was a lot. He is truly an insanely strong being, and I would be ashamed to not include him on this list.
Number 5, Damage. Damage is an anti-hero who is considered one of the strongest in the DC universe. The only catch is he can only transform into the unstoppable monster-like force, where he has powers such as super strength, durability, invulnerability, magic resistance, and a healing factor for 1 hour a day. However, during that 1 hour, he's pretty much indestructible and unstoppable. He even proved to be too much to handle for Wonder Woman, and later gave Superman and the Justice League a run for their money. However, he ultimately did end up being defeated by Deadman in the end, who showed up and possessed him for the remainder of his rampage hour, defeating him. Still, Damage is a pretty crazy powerful anti-hero that we likely won't see in the DCEU anytime soon. Likely due in part to how destructive he is, I'm sure. Number 4, Orion. Orion is one of the strongest of the new gods and is also Darkseid and Tigra's son. But despite the fact that he is the son of Darkseid, it doesn't mean that he's inherently one of the biggest bads around. In fact, Orion is actually a hero, the exact opposite of his dad. But not the opposite when it comes to the power that he wields. He is also considered a new god, which means that he's insanely strong, durable, and pretty much inexhaustible in a fight. He is immortal and can easily take hits from Superman without really showing much sign of injury. Orion is also a gifted fighter and leader, and at one point even was able to lead an army in defeating the entire Green Lantern Corps, himself fending off Hal Jordan with one mighty punch. He's like, punch, I'm gonna choke you a bit, and then fight is done. Goodbye. Leaving. I'm rolling out in space. Number 3. Phantom Stranger. The Phantom Stranger is pretty all-powerful. Initially, we didn't even fully understand his true identity on New Earth, nor his powers, which weren't super clearly defined initially. What has been defined, however, is that the Phantom Stranger is extremely powerful, and thus far seems mainly limited by the fact that he's not really permitted to interfere in the shaping of the universe, meaning he can aid in fights against universal threats, but not directly affect the outcome with his powers, more providing guidance than getting directly involved. While back in the New Earth continuity there were many potential backstories for the Phantom Stranger, on Prime Earth we know that he was once the Judas who was famous for betraying Jesus in the Bible. His punishment following his death was that he would be unable to die, but instead would have to walk the earth for eternity, making him virtually immortal. He became the servant of a voice that spoke to him, and with each task completed, he got closer to his own redemption. Though it has been thousands of years and he still has not achieved his redemption yet. Number 2. The Spectre. If we're going to talk about the Living Tribunal on our MCU version of this list, you know we gotta talk about the Spectre on our DCEU version. The Spectre is an immensely powerful cosmic entity who is often thought of as a hero, but has definitely had some methods to fighting crime that could be considered morally questionable? Like when he turned a man into wood and then sawed him to pieces? That's a thing that happened. Or when there was a guy that was afraid of fire and he's like, I'm gonna turn you into a candle and like melt you. That was also a thing that happened. I wonder when he turned that guy into wood and then cut him into pieces, if you could count the number of rings inside of him to tell how old he was, like a tree. Because the Spectre can do things like warp reality, that just means that he wouldn't really fit into the DCEU very easily, as we'd need some massive threats in order to give him any kind of real struggle. He would just be like, I'm gonna turn that person into wood. Now you're a candle. Now you're paper. I'm gonna cut you with scissors. That's all handled. Done. Next. Number 1. Dr. Manhattan. Outside of the Watchmen film we had, which isn't currently considered as part of the DCEU canon, it's unlikely we'll ever see Dr. Manhattan on the big screen again. It's especially hard to have someone like Dr. Manhattan in the films because, well, he's pretty much always naked, which means we either need to dress him up somehow, put him into an R-rated only film, or have a lot of conveniently placed fruit baskets and props around in the foreground of each shot in order to censor him. Dr. Manhattan, though, when it comes to his power levels, is one of the people responsible for creating the New 52 continuity. That's just how powerful he is. So to have someone who is capable of rewriting the universe in that way within the DCEU seems like it would be a lot, unless, I suppose, if you're planning on completely resetting the DCEU continuity.
Kicking off the list at number 10, Giganta. Dora Zuul made her first appearance in Wonder Woman Volume 2, Issue 126. She's a supersized villain. She's literally a giant, if your name didn't already tip you off for that. She was once suffering from a fatal blood disease, so in order to try and save herself, she attempted to transfer her life essence into the body of Wonder Woman, which I gotta say, great call. As far as vessels go, that's a pretty good one to use. Because Wonder Woman at this time was in a coma. She was being held at the experimental medical facility where Zuul was working, so kinda, it was worth a shot. Now during this process, Wonder Girl came in and interrupted it, so instead Zuul's life essence was transferred into a giant test gorilla named Giganta. I can't even say that with a straight face. So instead, Zuul's life essence was now transferred into a giant test gorilla named Giganta. Oops. Now of course, this was a no-go, so her next idea was to transfer herself again, but this time to a strong circus lady named Olga. The transfer worked and Doris could now turn into a giant because Olga apparently could do so before. I think we're okay without giants. I think anything with giants we're just gonna keep out. If it doesn't have a cape, then no. That's it. Number 9. Psycho Pirate. Psycho Pirate. Charles Halstead made his first appearance in All-Star Comics issue 23. He first showed up in the golden age of comics. He was originally an employee of Rex Morgan, who ran a newspaper company called The Daily Career. He wanted more success, of course, so he made the alias Psycho Pirate, and he started to use emotions as a theme for crimes. That sounds intimidating, I think. So the Justice Society would solve crimes based on emotions. That doesn't sound too powerful for the DCEU. If anything, it sounds a little boring where we're heading now. The new Psycho Pirate came out in Superboy Volume 6, Issue 23, and he was much different. Roger Hayden can now control emotions, which is a big upgrade. Psycho Pirate is aware that the universes have changed, like he saw the nature of reality die and then get reborn, like New Crisis, Flashpoint, all that good stuff. He was just stuck in the universe watching it all fold and then unfold again. The reality created by Dr. Manhattan's timeline tampering had Roger as a member of the 20, a group of Metropolis citizens infected with Brainiac's psionic virus. So now Hayden can alter your emotions using the Medusa mask. He's getting better and better. The first mask was an artifact stolen from the Metropolis Museum of Art. That mask gave him godly abilities, and we see this in Superman Volume 3, Issue 24. Now the second mask used was from Batman Volume 3, and that mask was more of a tool to help him channel his own ability to change others' emotions. Medusa mask or Majora's mask? Which would you rather own? It's a close one. And before we continue on with this list, you know the drill. Go ahead and give us a thumbs up if you're loving this part 2, which you should be if you're still on board. Those likes surely add up and help us out here at the studio, so thank you so much. Now let's get right back to this list. Number 8, Super Doom. Coming from Earth 45, this Superman was a project gone wrong. He first appeared in Action Comics Volume 2, Issue 9, when Jimmy Olsen created a machine that turns thoughts into reality. All these thought machines and emotion machines, it's a bit odd, but I like it. So the gang decided to make a robot Superman next with that machine. They ended up selling this device to Overcorp, which made it into Superman: The Last Night of Tomorrow, aka the monstrous Super Doom. Overcorp used him to take over the planet, but still, that wasn't enough. Super Doom entered the bleed space, where he would then search the multiverse for its creators, destroying planets and other versions of Superman like Optiman of Earth 36 and Superman of Earth 42. But eventually he came to Earth 23 and had to go toe-to-toe with their Superman, President Calvin Harris. I'm all for evil Supermans in a nightmare sequence, but Super Doom might be a little bit too much. I don't know. Number 7, Relic. Ancient enemy of the Green Lantern Corps, Relic made his first appearance in Green Lantern Volume 5, Issue 21. He's been around for a while, like before space-time. I'm talking like a while. Before all this, he was a scientist in his universe who believed that harnessing the emotional electromagnetic spectrum was a bad idea. He figured it would lead to tragedy, and given others on this list, I have to say, he was kind of onto something. So he thought all these other lightsmiths were drawing their power from a specific place, and eventually that place would run dry. Guy's a futurist, what can I say? So he searched the cosmos far and wide trying to prove his own theory, and he had universal support backing it. But nothing was jumping out at him. There was no solutions, he didn't really come across anything, until one by one the 7 core lightsmiths began losing their powers. The only living being left after that war was a lone green lightsmith. So Relic then passed to the next universe, and he was remade as a giant, kind of like Dor-Zul. We love giants. He was first found by White Lantern Kyle Rayner in the Templar Guardians. But he didn't want what happened to the Lightsmiths to happen here, so he traveled to Oa, where he warned the Green Lantern Corps that they should surrender their power rings. And they of course were like, no, get out of here, peace. And then in turn, Relic forcefully drained their powers and destroyed their planet. Either one way or another, I guess it's happening. Okay, Relic, sure. Number 6, Volthoom. Making his first appearance in Green Lantern Annual Volume 5, Issue 1, Volthoom was an ancient force that had the ability to warp reality. Sweet. He was originally from Earth 15, and after his world was on the brink of destruction, so him and his mother used the newly discovered emotional electromagnetic spectrum, which is a multiversal force powered by all life in the multiverse, and then they used this power to create the Travel Lantern, and Volthoom left to find safety, while his mother stayed behind and unfortunately, in superhero fashion, died right as he left. This first lantern traveled for weeks through space and time in desperate hopes to find something to save his home. So he goes to Earth 17 and he uses the spectrum to resurrect plant life, which is cool, but then next he travels to Earth 47 and they use the spectrum to create beautiful music, also pretty cool. And then he went to Earth 3 where he met a sorcerer named Mordu, in which he creates a power ring out of a piece of his soul, that ring of course being called the Ring of Volthoom. You're not going to name it after somebody else, so it's only fair. He finally found Earth 0 where he acted as the law and order. Eventually Volthoom's mind was corrupted from the spectrum and he became insane. I feel like anybody who has a ring in general just ends up going insane. Like Lord of the Rings, it's like, come on. Number 5, Agamemnon. Valley Halfling. Made his debut in Incredible Hulk 379, and he's the son of a mortal woman and Loki. Like, Loki. Yeah, Loki brought him to Asgard and took care of him. Now, Valley once ended up in Hell, one time. Now, the underworld of Asgard is usually a pretty rough place, but since Hela was his half-sister, she released him. See, it's all about who you know, guys. It's all about who you know. Valley upset many Asgardians by stealing their secrets, so Odin did what he does best, and he sent him off. Bye, peace, off to another realm, get out of here, go, scoot. He banished him to Earth, cursed with eternal adolescence. So Valley traded the pick of his future offspring to the Trojan race in exchange for knowledge of immortality, which is just a great deal all around. You think of both sides, you're like, I'll never have either of these, this is great. Now, he's never confirmed or denied that he was the Agamemnon who was king of Argos and commander-in-chief of the Greek army against Troy in ancient times, but at this point, I'm afraid to ask. Nobody wants to know. They're like, you know what? Keep your secrets, Mr. Secret Man. He's quite powerful, being a master tactician and strategist, and he's also quite experienced in the use of magique. So the one downside is that he's forever young, so he'll never get into bars. No, he's constantly being distracted by hormonal changes and even acne, so we're only human. Kind of. Number 4, Armageddon. Making his first debut in Incredible Hulk issue 413, he was also young when his life got flipped turned upside down. Fresh Prince. His father lost his life in a space battle, so he was up to bat when it came to claiming the throne of the Trojan Empire. Now, he did wonders in charge. He led his troops to many victories, worlds, galaxies, solar systems. He was claiming them all. Like, his wife passed away, and this guy was so into ruling that he didn't even notice. She had 2 sons, though, before she passed away, twin boys. But even they had to learn from Lord Vito, Armageddon's friend and advisor, because that's how far away he was. Not a great father. So one of the sons ended up not surviving a mission to Earth, and the other son fell in love with that other son's killer. That son, appropriately named Trauma, kidnapped Atlanta and brought her back to his homeworld, where his father Armageddon was quite impressed. Now the Hulk, Silver Surfer, and the Starjammers came around to demand her release, but he stood by his son's decision and fought the heroes off. Now Armageddon has the Trojan ability to channel cosmic energies through his body and can even withstand a blow from the World Breaker Hulk. So he's not one to mess around with. Number 3, Zax. Okay, this one's wild, although I have a feeling we're probably never going to see him in live action. One can only dream. So Zax, I'm gonna say Zax every time. No, I'm just kidding. So Zax made his first appearance in the Incredible Hulk issue 166. Right there on the cover it says It, the thing from Dynamo. It was originally the product of an accident that happened at Edison nuclear power plant when a group of criminals tried to power off New York City. So the gunfire that happened caused this massive chain reaction in the atomic reactor and resulted in this psionically charged electromagnetic field of humanoid form to be birthed. Okay, so basically he's a supervillain that can take out anybody in its way. Just a big electric mess. All Zax has to do is absorb their intelligence, and in turn it gets smarter, bigger, and badder. Being a creature of pure electricity, it can fly, manipulate electrical fields, and absorb people, all except the Hulk, you guessed it. Which makes for a suitable battle. Big green punchy guy versus Zax, the electrical cloud of emotions. 9 tickets in IMAX, please, thanks. Debit? Number 2, Sandman. While Sandman is more commonly known as a SpiderMan villain, sure, he does get on the naughty list for more than one superhero. One of them, of course, being the Incredible Hulk. So when the Sandman found out about the Air Force testing this new space warp ship, he wanted it for himself. I mean, who wouldn't want that lying around in their driveway? Are you kidding? Absolutely. So he wanted it so he could free his friend Blaster from the negative zone. So when he went to the military base, he met the Hulk, convinced the Hulk to help him out, and then while the Hulk was attacking the base and fighting off General Ross and all his forces, Sandman tried to take the ship for himself, that greedy little sandy fella. But Betty Ross was threatened, so the Hulk clapped his hands so hard that Sandman got blasted all across the area. Just nothing but sand, like a bathing suit after it was shaked out after a day at the beach. The Sandman was eventually knocked into a pressurized vat where he later emerged made out of glass. We love science. So if we need to beat the Sandman, we just gotta clap really hard at the same time. That's it. Guys, we all watch Friends. We watch the intro at the same time and we do those 4 claps. Boom, no more Sandman. He's gone. Otherwise, for sure, we need the Hulk. Call him immediately. And finally, number 1, Thanos. I have to finish with this one because although Thanos was in the MCU for sure, I still believe he's a villain that the Hulk should not go against. He's too powerful. Even before Thanos obtains all the Infinity Stones, he's able to lay out the Hulk in the opening scene of Infinity War. He doesn't even use the one stone that he does have, the Power Stone. No, all he needs is his big titan fists and a couple neck jabs, and the Hulk will literally retire. Even when Bruce Banner needs him to come back later on in the film, the Hulk's like, no, absolutely not. That guy? Yeah, get lost. I'm all set. You have the Hulkbuster, you don't need me, bye. In Infinity issue 6, we see Thanos knock the Hulk back with just one punch. And if raw strength wasn't enough to do the job, Thanos has made the Hulk attack his fellow Avengers in Avengers Assemble Volume 2, issue 4. There's also the series Thanos vs. the Hulk that was released back in 2015, and it's a bloody good time. I remember the first time seeing Infinity War when the Hulk got rocked. I was genuinely afraid of Thanos. I'm like, oh, he does more than sit in a throne after all. I'm gonna go change my pants chance now. Cheers.
And in at number 10 is Superman. We are kicking off this list with what everyone would expect to see, because it's just not interesting to have him any lower. That's my reasoning and I'm sticking to it. Superman is the baseline. He is what we compare almost all other DC superheroes to when we are talking about power. Superman at his base level can destroy planets, tank hits from just about anyone including Darkseid himself, and he has a whole plethora of abilities that some are even forgotten when writers use Superman in a story. The thing about Superman is that he almost has no upper limit. If this guy wants to, he will fly into not only our sun, but multiple suns throughout the universe to drink up their radiation in order to gain a massive power boost. He's been able to break the barrier between dimensions, and in some stories he has existed until the very end of the universe, splitting himself into multiples so that he can be a hero for the entirety of that universe, although that wasn't technically canon. The point is, while he is arguably without equal because of the fact that he has no real limit, there are a few members of the League who could give him a run for his money. In at number 9, Shazam. With the mystical power of 6 gods, Shazam is not just said to be the physical equivalent to a baseline Superman, but he can almost definitely take on Superman himself, as the Man of Steel has no resistance to magic. Shazam has actually proved himself to be faster than and also able to knock out Superboy Prime, who is one of the most powerful versions of Superman ever, able to shake reality with punches, that kind of thing. But this isn't a list about people who can take on Superman. Batman has stated that Shazam is one of the most powerful beings on planet Earth for a reason. He has KO'd the god of evil and father of Darkseid, Yuga Khan, with one punch. And speaking of gods, Shazam has been able to defeat the DC versions of Ares, Atlas, and Thor, all of whom are incredibly powerful gods. While he is astoundingly strong, fast, and durable, Shazam's true potential, I think, comes from his natural affinity for magic, which can potentially allow him to do almost anything, which I know to be true because of another magic-wielding leaguer. Number 8, Zatanna. A lot of people sleep on Zatanna, and that's a mistake. Zatanna is part of the Homo Magi race, giving her a genetic talent for magic that makes her one of the greatest magic users in the multiverse. Zatanna was born with magic, but she's not limited by that. With the addition of learned magics, Zatanna can cast a whole multitude of spells that allow her to do things like travel dimensions, summon objects and beings, perform telekinesis and advanced telepathy, redirect and return attacks, mess with the weather or even time of day, manipulate her own size or transform into basically anything, become intangible, and manipulate magical versions of the elements. But that's all the basic stuff. She can cast spells that can manipulate reality, alter the molecular structure of objects, and move forward, backwards, and freeze time itself, and that's not even getting into what she could do with black magic. Sure, she may not be as physically capable as some other characters on this list, but she has the potential to make child's play of most of them despite that fact. If you guys are enjoying this list so far, make sure to drop a like and subscribe here at Top 10 Nerd, and make sure to let us know any topics for videos you want to see in the future. But coming in at number 7 is Wonder Woman. As 1/3 of DC's Trinity, Wonder Woman has to make this list. Where Superman is a being of raw power, that, plus his outstanding moral character, are what makes him so unstoppable. But then we have Wonder Woman, who is almost equal in terms of strength, speed, and durability to the Man of Steel, but she's leagues and bounds above the guy in terms of her skill. In a melee fight, she will outmatch pretty much anyone, and she will be quicker than almost anyone, including Superman, because she doesn't even need to think when fighting. She's just a natural. I don't think we can actually show it, but my favorite Wonder Woman panel, which I think comes from Injustice, is literally her snapping Superman's arm using her elbow while he screams in pain, and Harley Quinn is in the background like rooting her on. It's fantastic. But even in regular continuity, she's been able to last a hot minute against a mind-controlled Superman who was not holding back, and she could have even taken him down if she wanted to. And then we talk about Death Metal, where Wonder Woman got powered up to the point she was taking on beings of cosmic levels of power using a magical chainsaw. Then she went on to Valhalla, of all places, but even managed to get out of there and come back to Earth. And that's the other thing. Wonder Woman has access to not only magical artifacts, but she was gifted with magical abilities by the goddess Hecate, or however you pronounce that. And those powers were leagues above Zatanna's own magical prowess. us. And we've already talked about how powerful magic can be. There isn't much on Earth that can really stand against Wonder Woman. And at number 6 though is Green Lantern. I think a lot of the time Green Lantern is just thought of as the guy who can make breakable green light constructs, but that is just a huge oversimplification. To prove my point, all we gotta do is look at some of the things done by the most powerful Green Lantern, Hal Jordan. Hal is essentially pure willpower, which is what powers his Green Lantern ring. This means he has incredibly intense levels of strength and durability, but anything he does with his ring is just better than any other lantern. And that's before he even forged his own ring, which no other Green Lantern has ever done. Hal has such control over his ring that he has been able to pull a spaceship out of the gravitational pull of a star, but he has also used the ring to attack nanites inside his own bloodstream. He can destroy entire planets, one-shot KO Superman, hit people so hard that it warps reality, and then as most people know, he destroyed every single member of the Green Lantern Corps. Now after creating his ring, he was even more powerful than that. He literally started to become a being composed of will, which doesn't even really make sense, but means he can't really die. He obliterated Sinestro, who was powered up by Parallax. He moved so fast he broke the Speed Force barrier, tanked a massive blast from Mogo, who was a Green Lantern that's a planet, and Mogo was being boosted up by hundreds of other lanterns when that happened. And he created hard light constructs that were actually alive and couldn't be beaten by the Green Lantern and Sinestro Corps combined. Absolutely insane.
Number 5, magic. Teleporters always rank high on my list of powerful heroes because I think teleportation is super OP, and magic is definitely no exception there, although she is exceptional. So exceptional in fact, if we didn't get to see her in the MCU, I personally would not be surprised. True, we did get to see magic appear in the New Mutants film, but that itself was outside of MCU continuity and canon, so doesn't count, which is really unfortunate as Anya Taylor-Joy was perfect in that role, and we likely won't get to see her take up the mantle again, which kinda bums me out. Magic is a member of the New Mutants who is also known for being not just a powerful teleporter, but magic wielder as the ruler of Limbo. This is where magic teleports through to get where she is going. While in Limbo, she also becomes god level due to her attachment and relationship with the dimension. Magic also has a dark side known as Dark Child. While in her Dark Child persona, she becomes virtually unstoppable and generally a lot more evil. Number 4, Nova. It feels pretty unlikely that we'll ever get to see any version of Nova show up in the Marvel Cinematic Universe at this point. Why? Well, because the Nova Corps were seemingly wiped out by Thanos when he went after them for the Power Stone. It's believed that all of Xandar was decimated in his attack, which likely means that the Nova Corps, who were there, were some of the first people to go. Unless there was somehow, I guess, a lone survivor who could become Nova in the future, it seems very unlikely we'll see any kind of character attached to Xandar or the Corps. This could be just what Marvel Studios was hoping to eliminate the chances of, though, with this plot point, as all versions of Nova are considered to be pretty epically powerful, whether we're talking about Sam Alexander, Rich Rider, or Eve Bakian. Just all the Novas. They're just all pretty crazy. Number 3, Blue Marvel. So as much as I really want Adam Brashear to come to the MCU, there is also a concern many have around the fact that this hero might just be too powerful to appear in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, at least as he is in the comics. Maybe if we toned him down. Granted, we have Captain Marvel, and now we have Monica Rambeau, who's pretty crazy powerful. So I'm really hoping I'm wrong about this one. But still, there is Captain Marvel and Monica Rambeau, and then there is Blue Marvel, who's kind of operating on a whole other level, due to the fact that his powers are derived from antimatter, and the fact that he is basically an antimatter generator / reactor. And if you don't know, antimatter is like crazy powerful and crazy efficient in the Marvel universe. I don't know about antimatter in real life. I don't even know if there is antimatter in real life. I don't know about that science. Number 2, Eternity. Eternity is not a conventional hero and more a cosmic entity, but like the Living Tribunal, they are also generally seen as a force of good, so hence why I'm counting them on the list. Eternity is actually just below the Living Tribunal in terms of rank in the universe and is the personification of time. They exist alongside their sister, Infinity. Eternity is capable of manipulating time and space on a lucrative scale. They are immortal and are considered an integral part of the universe, existing alongside other major cons concepts, which are also represented by powerful entities. Number 1. One Above All. The One Above All isn't your typical hero, but they are a very powerful force of good in the MCU, like Eternity. One Above All is seen as the creator of the multiverse and all beings within it. They're basically the god of the multiverse, the ultimate creator. We talked about the Living Tribunal on part 1 of this list, who is seen as the ultimate bringer of justice, the ultimate judge throughout the Marvel multiverse, and the One Above All is actually believed to be the entity that the Living Tribunal works for. One Above All is believed to be all-powerful and omnipotent, getting involved in the matters of its creations only when its interference is truly needed. They were the one who made Adam Warlock take up the mantle as their new Living Tribunal as payment for restoring all of reality after it was destroyed, which seems like a fair trade. They're like, hey, Adam Warlock, do this job and have lots of power, and I will return reality. Just come work for me, you know? I need a new Living Tribunal. You know how it is when the Living Tribunal dies. Actually, I don't know how that is. Sounds like a very rare problem.
Kicking off the list at number 10, the Time Trapper. First appearing in Adventure Comics 317, the Time Trapper comes from the far future. He actually prevented the Legion of Superheroes from traveling into their future using an iron curtain of time. He likes to hang out at his home located safely at the end of time. How neat is that? Kinda similar to Kang. In his first few issues, the Time Trapper was seeking the Concentrator, which was a weapon that draws energy, any energy source in the known universe, together. It's also a pretty big secret as well. The Time Trapper pretended to be the commissioner of the Science Police and tortured the Legionnaires, although they said it was a test in order to gain intel. Now, Lightning Lad knew something was fishy, so he cracked and spilled secrets, false ones of course. So this brought the team to actually figure out how to assemble the real Concentrator. And when an angry Time Trapper returned, he launched a plethora of Dark Stars at the crew, but luckily that Concentrator could absorb any energy source, like I said, so they were blasted out of existence. We're good. The Legion lived to tell the tale, but we just got Kang in the MCU, so I don't think we need another Time Lord showing up. My brain hurts enough already. Give us like 5 years and then bring in some more time stuff. Number 9. Eclipso. Making his first appearance in House of Secrets issue 61, Eclipso was made from God's spirit of wrath. He's the living embodiment of wrath. It doesn't get more menacing than that, folks. He was made to punish the wicked, to clean the world of evil, of course, until the Spectre replaced him. Wrath was driven by anger, whereas vengeance, that required more of a discerning hand. So what happened after was Wrath's physicality was trapped within an all-black diamond called the Heart of Darkness. The Heart of Darkness, kind of like the heart of the ocean, but instead of Rose tossing it overboard, a treasure hunter found it in Africa and accidentally split it into 1,000 pieces, and now we're all... Each of those pieces contained a shard of darkness. So Eclipso figured out a way to possess people through these diamonds, and that first man being possessed was Bruce Gordon. Bruce was a scientist specializing in solar energy, and while he was in a jungle observing a solar eclipse, a sorcerer named Mofir attacked him with one of those black diamonds, and after that, every eclipse, Eclipso would take over Bruce. Unbeknownst to Bruce though, Eclipso would soon learn to bind himself to anybody near any shard that happened to be angry at the time. Nowadays there's a lot of angry folks, so this is bad news. The entity of wrath possessing anybody who gets upset, that sounds, yeah, just smile and wave, I guess. Just lie. Just lie and pretend you're happy. Then you're good. Before we continue on with this list, if you want to spread the love and hit that thumbs up, it really does wonders for us at the channel. You guys are amazing. Thanks so much for watching. Let's keep this going. Number 8, Justice Lord Superman. Coming from the animated universe, the 2003 Justice League episode titled A Better World showed us one that's rather the opposite. This parallel universe showed Kal-El and the Justice Lord storming the White House after President Lex Luthor had just executed the Flash. Now the team of course wasn't too happy, so Batman and Wonder Woman fought off the Secret Service while Superman told Luthor that he's taken him in. Lex is insane, so he had a button ready that could literally start a nuclear war if it was pressed. And he's threatening Superman, saying that he needs to use deadly force if he wants to save the people. So Superman's like, okay, and then just eyes glow red, and then he turns them into ashes, just like that. And when Batman and Wonder Woman come back in, it's far too late. Superman just has a smile on his face, and Lex is just a pile of dust. Good times. After this, for the next 2 years, the Justice Lords would rule using violence like it was normal. They saw this and they're like, well, that certainly did the trick. Let's just keep doing that. Justice Lord Superman used his heat vision to wipe out all of Earth's criminals and villains. If we had him in the DCEU, the movie would be a lot shorter than 4 hours. It would be like 36 minutes. Snyder cut, maybe 44 minutes. Number 7, Superboy Prime, another super menace. First appearing in DC Comics Presents issue 87, this version of Supes has more powers and less weaknesses. I'm talking immunity to kryptonite and magic, which is a Fantastic combo. He arrived to Earth and was soon discovered by Jerry and Naomi Kent while they were on a hike in a New England seacoast town. They named him Clark, although Clark Kent was the name of a popular comic book hero named Superman. So yeah, Superman already existed on this Earth, so Clark grew up and later attended a costume party at a beach and dressed like Superman. He went to get a glimpse of Halley's Comet and it was all a good time, and then all of a sudden a tidal wave hits, this portal opens up, and the Superman from the comics pops out. Now at the same time, young Clark's powers manifested and he quickly learned what to do with them in the moment. Superboy then followed that Superman back into the portal to an alternate reality and he would never be the same again. Crisis on Infinite Earths was this multiversal catastrophe where parallel dimensions were being consumed by the Anti-Monitor, who I'll talk about later. Superboy dove in, joined the fight, but was unable to prevent the destruction of his Earth. So Superboy Prime and other survivors escaped to a paradise dimension that Alexander Luthor Jr. offered. Using crystals, Superboy just relived happy times in this paradise, but eventually he got frustrated and shattered the barrier of reality. He literally punched everything apart. He retconned quite a bit in DC continuity. For example, he brought back Jason Todd, he combined Superman's origins, Doom Patrol was now rebooted, and we had numerous incarnations of Hawkman and the League of Superheroes. I feel like DC could use a big bad Superboy Prime punch to clear up the timeline, but hopefully the Flash movie does that, because this guy is just a little too crazy. Number 6, Brainiac. Another close rival of Superman's, Brainiac made his first appearance in Action Comics 242. This guy right off the bat is a very specific villain. He would love to steal cities. Yeah, watch out for your cities, keep them safe, put them under your mattress. He took Metropolis at one point. This guy's wild. He would use his shrinking ray, zoom, shrink your city, and then take them back to his planet. Vril Doc started his days as a scientist, and one day he successfully cloned himself because he needed an assistant, so who better to hire than yourself? He built the spaceship Next and traveled to the cosmos, gaining knowledge and studying alien organisms with the help of his robot drones, and during these travels he came across Krypton while General Zod was still running the show. So of course, this dude shrunk down the entire city of Kandor and studied it in his ship. He made a remote scout unit that believed it was the original Vril Docs, and then it traveled to Earth and took over the body of sideshow mentalist Milton Find, whose stage name was Brainiac. Now it makes sense. Number 5, Ravage. Dr. Geoffrey Crawford was a professor of physics at Desert State University and was a mentor to Bruce Banner initially. See, Crawford was developing this teleportation device where point A would scan all of your DNA and then zoom, your DNA would end up on the other end. Sounds like nothing could ever go wrong at all in that thing. So Banner went back to Crawford in hopes that he could help him think of a solution for his big green alter ego problem. And then when Bruce got there, Crawford was in a wheelchair and he was suffering from a disease, but he still opted out to help Bruce with his problem. What a nice guy. Turns out Crawford wanted Bruce's DNA in hopes of curing his debilitating disease, but while testing out his theory, he warped to point B and then the DNA had bonded with him, creating this other type of Hulk called Ravage. And because Bruce tried to stop him during this, his DNA meshed together while he was angry, so you already know what that looks like. Number 4, Red Hulk. He made his first appearance in Incredible Hulk issue 1 as General Ross, but come the first issue of volume 2, Ross goes beast mode and becomes one of the Hulk's greatest threats of all time. Red Hulk was created using gamma radiation, like the Hulk, but what makes him more of a foe is the fact that he also has cosmic rays added to that already aggressive mix. So the Red Hulk, or Rulk, which is fun to say, doesn't get stronger the angrier he gets like Bruce. No, he actually gets hotter. Yeah, he gets so hot and then all of a sudden he turns into Ryan Gosling. No, like heat. He physically burns up, that's what I mean. So during one of the first run-ins with the Red Hulk, when the two Goliaths were scrapping it out, the sand around them melted because of this heat and turned into glass, which is pretty cool. More stuff to break too, which you gotta love if you're the Hulk. Number 3, Juggernaut. Kane Marco made his first comic book appearance in X-Men issue 12. Kane and Charles Xavier were serving together in the same unit, but when Kane was under fire, he ran off to take cover in a nearby cave. Now this cave was actually home to the lost temple of Sidorak, so Kane grabbed this glowing ruby from the lap of an idol, which is a great idea if you've seen every movie. He read the inscription and possessed the power of the crimson bands of Sidorak, becoming a human Juggernaut. Then an explosion went off, poof, and the Juggernaut was trapped under the rubble and Xavier got out of dodge. Now after he dug himself out, he destroyed an entire village with the previous man who held the Juggernaut title, Giganta, in the mix as well. While it might be cool to see Juggernaut and the Hulk fight in live action, we also have to get the X-Men there first, and it doesn't seem like Marvel is in a rush to bring them in, as we saw from WandaVision. Hashtag Ralph Boner. In World War Hulk in X-Men issue 2, we see these two magnificent beasts go at it, and they're both pretty close in strength, but what makes Kane hard to fight is the fact that he can last some time without needed rest. His stamina is nuts. He can also summon his armor at any time, so that certainly comes in handy. Number 2, Wendigo. This next one comes from Canada, so we gotta keep an eye out for this one, Chris. We gotta keep our peepers open. Paul Cartier made his comic book debut in the Incredible Hulk issue 162. Yes, that rhymed. The Wendigo is a result of an ancient curse from the elder gods of Canadian folklore, and it transforms anybody who eats human flesh into this massive fur-covered beast, so don't eat flesh. It's been referred to as an indestructible force of nature being made from the gods and all. Now this all began when two Canadian lads were in the wilderness hunting, and then when wolves attacked and wounded one of the men, he ended up passing away from the attack, and his buddy was really hungry. He was starving, so he kind of sort of had to eat his friend's skin to survive. Yuck, but also you have to, man, it's part of it. Thus turning him into this Wendigo. Now it took Wolverine's help for the Hulk to take the Wendigo down, and just the origin story alone for this guy, I don't think we'll be seeing humans eating other humans in the MCU anytime soon, or if we do, hopefully it's Marvel Zombies. Either way, I'm not ready for that yet. Number 1, the Maestro. I know that name sounds cool, but this guy is an absolute nightmare to be around. He is not a conductor of classical music, no. In the series Incredible Hulk Future Imperfect, we see this version of the Hulk way more weird than Smart Hulk dabbing. Yeah, even weirder than that. He made his first appearance in a vision in the Incredible Hulk Volume 2 issue 401, and Maestro was the main antagonist in the Incredible Hulk Future Imperfect storyline. Now this story of course takes place about 100 or so years in the future after a nuclear war put the planet super close to extinction. Now this alternate future version of the Hulk, Maestro, had been absorbing all of the nuclear radiation this entire time, and he ended up becoming the strongest thing on the planet. Massive increases in strength and anger plus the brains of Banner made him arguably unstoppable. He's big, smart, strong, and a total nightmare to be around. I mean, maybe we could get some sort of Future Imperfect storyline, but I feel like it's way too dark for Disney. But hey, never say never.
Number 10, Beast. Beast is probably one of the most unstoppable characters at Marvel Comics right now. And while technically still a hero, so relevant to this list in terms of his classification between being a goodie and a baddie in general, he still has been up to some pretty questionable things in order to protect Krakoa, including basically turning Wolverine into a mindless slave. On the more optimistic side of Hank's history though, we also see an example of how unstoppable he can be in terms of his ability to seek out knowledge and never give up. After House of M, Beast for a good while was focused on finding a way to restore mutant kind and bring back the mutants they had lost in the aftermath, thanks to Wanda's reality warping magic. Hank tried everything from science to mysticism, but in the end was sadly unsuccessful. However, he still searched far and wide for a very long time, which I think should get him some unstoppable points. I think he also even created an organization just to figure that problem out, so yeah. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, be sure to show us that you love us by giving this video a thumbs up.
And at 9, Franklin Richards. Franklin Richards is the son of Reed and Sue Richards from the Fantastic Four, obviously. I don't feel like I needed to say it, but I still needed to say it. And even while currently or in the actual real present year of the comics, he's a toddler, he's still an absolute powerhouse, and I'm gonna count him, okay? Especially since the freaking Celestials have deemed this kid beyond Omega level on the scale of mutant-based powers. Cause when a future version of yourself comes to your present and then manages to bend Galactus to their will, making Galactus Franklin's herald, I don't think there's much else that they can really do aside from just accept it. Hey, that's like 100%ing life. There's nothing you can do after that, which I think speaks for itself. This kid is able to tear the universe apart with a single thought, in essence, probably making him the scariest damn toddler on the face of the earth and the galaxy, aside from eventually when I have mine, because that will be the spawn of Satan. And that's also coming from someone who already thinks that toddlers are scary. Alright, you should have seen that one who was trying to stab me with safety scissors. That was a time. Gotta love Tuesdays. Also, according to the history of the Marvel Universe, the book, Franklin Richards is supposed to survive until the end of his universe and then pass on to the next one, like Galactus did, which is insane. Dude was born from a girl who can go invisible and a guy who can stretch. Jeez.
Number 8. Moon Girl. Friends, I just read the Moon Girl team up with the X-Men, which continues her journey on the hunt for Devil Dinosaur, who has been dino-napped, and it was way too cute, and I have to include her, so sorry but not sorry. Also, Moon Girl does not get enough love, and Luna Lafayette, she's pretty unstoppable, let's be honest. Not only does she succeed in rescuing Devil Dinosaur in her team-up series, and as such will be returning with her own series with her dino pal in tow, which I recently picked up the first issue of, although I haven't read it yet, but she also has solved problems that have stumped many genius-level individuals in the Marvel Universe. Moon Girl was smart enough to find a way to almost single-handedly destroy the Terrigen Mists, when that threatened basically a war between the Inhumans and the mutants. I mean, granted, there were others who were kind of trying to puzzle it out before her, and succeeding at least somewhat in that, but it was really Moon Girl that made the destruction of the Mists possible in the short time the heroes had left to rectify the conflict between the two sides. And while her instantly fixing Forge's work may have irked a lot of comic book fans, I will say it did show just how brilliant Moon Girl is, because Forge is literally one of the best inventors that we have at Marvel Comics in terms of his intellect and his know-how, so that just goes to show you basically how cool Moon Girl is. I don't really see it as a downside, but I understand. I love Forge too, so it is a little like, oh, my heart.
And at 7, Spider-Man. No matter what Spider-Man or Spider-Person you're referring to, none of them will ever be stopped in the grand scheme of things, alright? Not only is Peter alone an insanely resilient individual, but that's part of the whole Spider-Person identity. Getting back up no matter how many times you get knocked down or no matter how hard you hit the mat. Which is why Spider-Man is Marvel's most popular character, or well, one of the reasons. Which is yet another reason why he's unstoppable. Because why would Marvel end a character that is just making them mad bank? Spider-Man's introduction in essence resurrected the MCU in a time where people thought that Civil War was going to be lame, and now seemingly the driving force behind it, since the majority of the OGs have retired or were killed or sacrificed themselves or whatever. Spider-Man is a powerhouse in a ton of industries, and that plot armor is going to be more powerful than anything Tony Stark could ever make for him. Cosmic Spider-Man was awesome and something I want to cosplay, but the plot armor is truly the most powerful version of this character. Plus the whole thing where he has to actively pull his punches, otherwise, you know, we'll have a whole Andrew Garfield situation. And then when he threatened the Kingpin, because, you know, if things had gone another way, nobody would have been able to stop him. He would have just I would have liked to see that though.
Number 6. Colossus. I mean, it's literally in Colossus's name at one point, hence why he has to make our cut and why he takes one of our top spots. Colossus is known for being the unstoppable Colossus in Marvel's Contest of Champions, but also in the comics during the Fear Itself event when he became the avatar of Sidorak for a time, replacing Cain Marko. In fact, whenever Colossus is the avatar of Sidorak, that's what we call him, Unstoppable Colossus, because Juggernaut is Unstoppable Juggernaut. And if you have his card in Marvel Snap, it is easy to see why we consider him to be so unstoppable just in general. Sorry, I'm obsessed with Marvel Snap lately, so it's probably going to be mentioned now and then in our videos. Even though we are not sponsored by Marvel Snap, to be clear, but we should be. I love that game. In Snap, Colossus's card ability is an ongoing. He cannot be moved, destroyed, or have his power reduced. And he comes by this card ability honestly, as even in the comics, Colossus is known for being an unstoppable force. Number 5. Silver Surfer. The Silver Surfer is one of the strongest beings in the Marvel Universe. He is considered to be the most powerful of all Galactus's heralds, and despite usually being associated with that Marvel antagonist, typically acts as a hero, even choosing to stay on Earth for a time after coming to warn them of the arrival of Galactus. Silver Surfer is Norrin Radd, a hero who possesses the power Cosmic, which grants him tons of astonishing abilities. The power Cosmic is OP. He's also virtually indestructible, being immortal, invulnerable, and having a healing factor, even if you could hurt him. He also now is basically untouchable, being intangible as well. And that might sound like a setback, but he can still merge with other living beings, in essence bonding with them and using them as a host. So even though he can't physically touch stuff, he kinda still can. The Silver Surfer isn't just powerful alone either, he also possesses the power to bestow portions of his powers on others, which would have been really handy when everyone was dealing with Thanos, his army, and the Black Order in Avengers Infinity War. Number 4. Hope Summers. Hope Summers is the adopted daughter of both Cable and later Cable's wife in the future, who is actually also named Hope, but not the same Hope. Hope was the mutant messiah baby, the first new mutant born after the events of M-Day, and actually originally she didn't have a name at all. The baby would be raised by both Cable and Hope, only being given the name Hope Summers after her adoptive mother died, so she was basically named after her. Hope's mutant powers allow her to mimic the powers of others, managing to use those powers at their peak potential, even if she's completely inexperienced with them or unaware even of what they are or how they work at all. Hope's use of any powers she adopts is intuitive. She doesn't need to make physical contact to mimic them, she just needs to be in the area of the mutant who possesses them as well. Her own powers cannot be absorbed, and she has a calming effect on others' mutant abilities, basically helping to perfect and stabilize them. So Hope's also just a powerful character to have around if you're a mutant who's like, I don't really know what I'm doing. This makes her an integral part of the Five, a group of mutants responsible for resurrecting fallen or lost mutants of Krakoa. Despite the fact that Hope's powers are believed to be restricted to the adoption of other mutant abilities, she and Scarlet Witch together rid the world of the Phoenix Force during Avengers vs. X-Men. Now, this is kinda weird because Scarlet Witch no longer is a mutant in the current comic book continuity, which could imply that Hope's powers mimicry is actually not therefore mutant exclusive. Unless something else was going on there and it was more like Scarlet Witch influencing Hope, I don't know, but I'm just saying if Hope was influencing any of that, that doesn't make sense if Scarlet Witch is no longer a mutant. Unless that's all a lie, and that's gonna be re-retconned away. Please do that. Please do that. Number 3. Phoenix. One hero that it seems is really hard to get right when it comes to the films is Jean Grey. Jean by herself is already likely too powerful to show up, although I will say I think you can make that work if you just, I don't know, put more of a lockdown on her power set. However, if we are talking Jean unleashed, Jean at her full potential, that's just not going to work. And if we're talking about bringing Phoenix into the mix and bonding Phoenix with Jean, that's also going to be a huge problem. Anytime you have a character like that who has the power to warp or manipulate reality, you're going to have a challenging time writing any kind of threat for them to face. As with what usually happens with Jean Grey, you can have the Dark Phoenix come in and play villain, you can have Jean struggle to control her own powers and even struggle to maybe hold on to her sanity in the face of her powers, but a hero who happens to have control and be able to basically fix the world as she sees fit, that's a problem. It's like any villain you face, you're just gonna be like, well, you're gone. You never existed. Done. Easy. What's next? Number 2. Living Tribunal. The Living Tribunal isn't entirely a hero, or not a hero in the traditional sense, but is usually considered to be a force of good because of what they represent. The Living Tribunal brings a force of balance and justice to the cosmos and across the multiverse. While there are many different alternate versions of characters from each universe, there's actually only one Living Tribunal, which watches over all of the realities, getting involved when they believe an injustice has been committed and the scales need to be balanced. Of course, only if the injustice is super great. They're not just like, hey, I saw you littered, that's not cool, let's go to court. So not every injustice. The Living Tribunal was the one to call to trial a case of 1610, or the ultimate reality, versus the current main continuity reality of Earth 616. This case was about determining which reality should ultimately be considered the true main reality, as the Living Tribunal considered that the Earth of 1610 could actually be a good replacement for Earth 616. Fortunately, She-Hulk was able to convince them otherwise, because She-Hulk is an amazing lawyer. Number 1. The Brothers. The Brothers are a duo of cosmic entities who exist even outside of their respective multiverses, as each one represents either the DC or the Marvel multiverse. These two characters initially showed up in a crossover comic called DC vs. Marvel, which already made it unlikely that we'll see them anytime soon in the MCU, because we would then need a crossover movie, which I don't think is going to happen yet. Maybe at some point. For a time, the brothers considered fighting one another in an attempt to acquire complete uniqueness, but instead decided, as they were pretty evenly matched, that they should appoint representatives from their universes to act as their champions. It's believed that the brothers are actually more powerful than the sum of their parts, meaning that even the Living Tribunal could be considered below them in terms of power levels and importance. While the brothers also have a male-centric name, the Brothers, it should be noted that they're actually genderless, so they're also kind of the sisters. They're just whatever. They're just called the Brothers. They look like giant mechs, so you know. No bits. I don't think.
Kicking off the list at number 10, Matthew Malloy. While we're eagerly awaiting the arrival of mutants into the MCU, there's quite a few mutants that I wouldn't want hanging out near Peter, Ned, or MJ, like Matthew Malloy, for example. See, Matthew was a regular Joe living in Charleston, South Carolina, but all of a sudden Earth gets hit with a Skrull invasion. Gotta love Mondays in the Marvel Universe. Sick. Things escalate when his wife Jules is vaporized by a blast from said Skrull ship, and his home was also just toast. Just a complete tragedy from the start. Now, one depressing, dark, lonely year later, he sees his late wife's sister, and they finally catch up. And it's hard for Matthew, of course, to talk about this stuff. This is still just a year ago, so it's all very fresh. So he's feeling it, and that's when his mutant powers decided to manifest. He erupted with energy, sadly also ending the life of Jules' sister. Not looking good so far. And then while he's standing there in shock, Maria Hill's hologram shows up out of a drone, and she's like, "Are you okay? Are you a mutant? What are your powers? What's going on? Do you have Geico?" He's a little stressed out on what's happening, so he freaks out a little more. So she sends in a strike team, and this just caused him to release even more energy and take even more lives. S.H.I.E.L.D. ended up sending in an airstrike, and that ended the lives of Cyclops, Magic, and Matthew, but those powers were better than we thought, because Matthew came back to life. Immortality for the win. Next, he teleported to the Jean Grey school, where he then took the life of Emma Frost. Now, Tempest at this point decided the only way to take care of this beyond Omega level threat was to go back in time and make sure his parents never meet. Then we can avoid having this supervillain from exploding over and over again. There's a link there, page 10. Mutants are cool and all, but this is evidence of how a regular guy can be riddled with tragedy in the Marvel Universe. Imagine if Zemo got these powers, Civil War would be over in like 22 minutes. Number 9, Molecule Man. Owen Reese started his days out as a small, puny, ridiculously looking laboratory technician whose life changed forever one day at work. Also, that's how the Watcher described him. I'm not being mean. He's breaking down his origins to the Fantastic Four, and he's low-key roasting the guy the entire time. It's pretty great. He was working for Acme Atomic Corp, but one day he got distracted and made a mistake while making adjustments to that atomic machine. He was distracted because he was monologuing about how much his life sucks. He was like, "Oh, I'm just a nobody wearing green pants at work, boo-hoo, no one knows my name." And then in the middle of his pity party, he gets blasted with energy, but somehow he survives. His boss of 12 years calls him in the office, and he's like, "Hey, I heard about your accident, Mr. whatever your name is. We can't have that happen here. You're fired." Which, first of all, as far as lawsuits go, could you imagine? But Owen doesn't pack up and leave. No, instead, he pulls out a wand that can control his powers, and he turns Boss Man into a snow cone. He can now control every molecule in the universe, and like Reed Richards says, if a man can control molecules, he can control anything. Guy's really brilliant with that groundbreaking assessment. Thanks, Reed. And before we continue on with this list, if you want to go ahead and give this video a thumbs up, it's a lot of dark, tragic stuff going on here, so let's brighten the mood a little bit by doing a little hitting that button. Thanks so much, you guys are the best. Back to this list. Number 8, Mad Jim Jaspers. Old Jimmy J. Okay, he made his first appearance in Daredevil's number 7 back in 1983. He was created by Alan Davis and Alan Moore, and when he first hit the pages, he was a British politician serving as Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. He was serving as a member of Parliament for Haslop West, and he wasn't a fan of superheroes either. He wanted to keep Britain safe, and superheroes crashing through buildings and punching each other in the back, no thanks. Sounds like the opposite of safety. They're old school, I get it. But he also wasn't alone. Many others agreed with him, and in turn, he won a general election. Only 2 issues after he's introduced, we find out he's a mutant with reality warping powers, who of course is also insane. He was just taking out other heroes so that he could rule secretly. Classic little twisty twist. He created and used this machine called the Fury, which hunted down superhumans. Meanwhile, he would be off committing crimes with his Alice in Wonderland themed gang. I know Disney loves crossovers, but I think this would be a little too weird. Number 7, Mephisto. In a list of villains too powerful for the MCU, clearly Mephisto is on that list. We thought he was going to be the one pulling the strings in WandaVision, but as the catchy theme song revealed, it was Agatha Harkness all along. Mephisto made his first full appearance in Silver Surfer issue 3, and he's been making deals with everybody since. Like when SpiderMan revealed his identity in the Civil War storyline, that led to a bullet striking Aunt May, so he offers Peter a deal while Aunt May is dying in the hospital. The world will forget Peter Parker is truly Spider-Man, but in turn Mephisto gets his marriage. It's kind of like Shrek 4, but way more fun. And this movie's probably gonna make way more money than Shrek 4. I mean, maybe, hopefully, I hope. You don't even need to be a superhero to have an eventful night with Mephisto either. Like in Journey into Mystery issue 627, he would show up to a random pub and he tells the bartender a story, and if you listen to his tale, he'll give you a nice fat tip. But if you slip up, things can get pretty ugly. Next time you get that really annoying regular at your bar, just think, it could literally be the devil and be a lot worse. Consider yourself lucky. Number 6. Vulcan. The younger brother of both Cyclops and Havoc, Gabriel Summers made his first appearance in X-Men Deadly Genesis. Before Catherine Summers even had a chance to give birth to the third child, he was transferred into an incubation accelerator, so he grew up real quick. After this, he was sent to Earth to work for Eric the Red, but luckily he didn't stick around to let that happen too long. He changed his name quickly from Gabriel to Kid Vulcan, which sounds way cooler already, but was also inspired by Roman mythology. I guess the other names already belong to DC characters. But Xavier eventually met him, and because of his mental powers, he knew that this boy was a relative to the Summers family. Vulcan had forgot about his history at this point as well, but he suited up with Petra, Darwin, and Sway, and together they rescued the original X-Men. It wasn't easy though. Cyclops thought Vulcan had died when the island decided to fight back. Vulcan is an Omega level mutant, and he's also insane. What a jazzy combo. Vulcan can manipulate, absorb, and control energy. This includes Cyclops' optic blasts or even Adam Warlock's energy. And of course, interstellar flight makes those cosmic commutes nice and smooth. Number 5. Kid Omega. Quentin Quire made his first appearance in X-Men issue 134. He's been described as one of the most powerful telepaths right next to Jean Grey, and believe it or not, he was once also the host of the Phoenix Force. In his early super days, Quentin was one of Xavier's prized pupils, until he put together the Omega Gang. He wasn't always a bad kid though. It's just on his birthday, when he was still young, he received a call from his parents to say that he was adopted. And honestly, if I got that gift on my birthday, I'd probably turn evil too. I don't blame the kid. This Omega Gang likes to handle humans the way that they feel like, with violence and mutant monologues. He's been described as an Omega level telepath and telekinetic, so if mutants are too much for the MCU right now, Kid Omega surely won't be around for quite a while. Number 4. Overmind. First appearing in Fantastic Four issue 113, Overmind, aka Grom, was an Eternal born on the planet Young. He was a fierce gladiator whose job it was to prevent overpopulation. He conquered hundreds of worlds, he won thousands of fights, and he took out entire species. He's the champion of champions. Literally, the Eternals held the games to test everybody to see who the most powerful was, and Grom was the winner. He's the ultimate physical specimen of the Eternals, and part of me wants to meet him in the next Eternals movie, and part of me doesn't want to know what conquering planets and thousands of souls looks like either. Let's keep this guy in the books, definitely. Number 3. Juggernaut. Kane Marco made his first comic book appearance in X-Men issue 12. When Kane and Charles Xavier were serving together in the same unit, they were all under fire, so they had to run and take cover in a nearby cave. Now the cave was actually home to the lost temple of Sidorak. So just who is this Sidorak guy? And also, nice temple by the way. Sidorak is a powerful entity that is both a god and a demon. Best of both worlds, lovely. He was worshipped on Earth way back in the day, but was eventually banished to the Crimson Cosmos. Sidorak's gem contained all of its power, so when Kane stumbled across it and then decided to read the inscription, whoever touches this gem shall possess the power of the Crimson Bands of Sidorak. Henceforth, you who read these words shall become forevermore a human Juggernaut. And then Kane turned into just that. Now we have Ryan Reynolds coming over from the Foxverse into the MCU, and I doubt they would bring over such a high caliber character like Juggernaut as well. He might be a little bit too soon for that. He would literally rip the Avengers apart also. We see Doctor Strange summon the Crimson Bands of Sidorak in Infinity War while the team is fighting Thanos on Titan, so never say never. Number 2. Proteus. Kevin McTaggart was the son of Moira McTaggart and her husband Joseph. Now the marriage was the opposite of healthy. Joseph was abusive mentally and physically and just an all-around horrible human being. So Moira got out of there. She didn't even tell Joseph that she was pregnant. The less he knows the better, honestly. Just move on, get out of Dodge. So young Kevin and Moira soon lived together at her mutant research center off the coast of Scotland. Now Kevin, as he got older, manifested mutant abilities, so now he has this uncontrollable need for power. He craved it, literally. So Moira had to hide him. She had to keep him locked up in a cell for years and only referred to him as Mutant X, which is kind of a dark nickname already off the bat. I mean, sure, could have just still called him Kevin, but great. She wanted to keep him safe and also not have strangers get the soul sucked out of them on their way to work. So that's a bonus. Keep him tucked below. But one day while Magneto was fighting the X-Men, Kevin's cell was damaged and he got out. Since the isosteric energy in his cell was no longer holding him back, Kevin was able to take down Polaris, Multiple Man, and he was even able to evade the Phoenix. But after doing so, his body began to burn out, just like Moira tried to prevent all this time. So now the only solution he has was to possess human hosts, one after another. He renamed himself Proteus, with his imagination the only thing that limits his powers. He's made of psionic energy, and he too can warp reality. Every time he possesses a new host, he gets stronger and stronger and stronger, until eventually the host burns out, and then he warps to possess another poor soul. And finally, number 1, Amora the Enchantress. She made her first debut back in Journey into Mystery issue 103, and her relationship with Thor is... honestly, I'd kind of love to see this in live action, but I feel like we're quite far from this type of power in the MCU. So half the time she wants to take out Thor, and the other half she's trying to take him out to dinner. It's really a love-hate relationship. Now, Amora has a pretty sweet life before all this. She's got multiple mansions throughout all the 9 realms, and can make gold and diamonds with her tears. So even on a bad day, she's still getting rich. She's really good at seducing people as well. I mean, it's literally her superpower. For example, Scourge, she would seduce him into helping her with evil plans, and he was like, oh yeah, you bet, anything for you, you're so hot, let's do it. And then afterwards, Amora wouldn't follow through with her side of the deal. She would just continue to play hard to get. She messes with your mind and your heart. That's a double whammy. One kiss is all it takes for her to completely own you and your soul. In the comics, she was sent by Odin to take out Jane Foster because the whole, loving on different worlds thing is long distance, I guess. That's a no-go for the God Squad. But when she tried to attack Jane, Thor intervened and she was banished to Earth by Odin, where she then joined the Masters of Evil. Now, she doesn't have too much experience with hand-to-hand combat because, well, she doesn't really need it. She just gets other lovers to fight her fights for her. The Bachelorette in space. Nice. Tune in. Love it.
Number 10, Martian Manhunter. While we did get a glimpse at what Martian Manhunter could have looked and acted like in the DCEU through Zack Snyder's cut of the Justice League, we still haven't had Martian Manhunter properly introduced in the main continuity of the DCEU. Main continuity, I guess, for the cinematic universe. Unfortunately, while Zack Snyder's cut was his intended vision for the film that he was forced to leave due to a personal tragedy, it's not considered canon to the DCEU. Although this could be retconned later depending on what happens in the Flash movie. Who knows, the Snyderverse could become part of the DCEU again. Martian Manhunter getting the axe initially in the theatrical release of Justice League could have to do with the fact that he is super cosmic or a little more complicated than most heroes when it comes to his relationship with Earth, or it could have to do with the additional problem of his powers. Also, Martian Manhunter is kind of just complicated in general, but in a good way. Despite the fact that Martian Manhunter, like most other Martians, has a fear of fire, he is still insanely OP when it comes to his powers. Also, Martians might be afraid of fire, but it doesn't actually hurt them as severely as their fears would imply. It's a psychological thing. It's not like, yeah, and if you set me on fire, I die, just poof, I'm gone. That's not a thing that happens. They just get burned, like we would. John Johns possesses powers of telepathy, telekinesis, super strength, super speed, durability, shapeshifting, invisibility, self-duplication, biofusion, and X-ray vision, just to name a few. So, yeah. I feel like that could be a big part of why we don't really have him as like a main part of the Justice League yet. Number 9, Batmite. Although he's somewhat mischievous when it comes to Batmite, he's still generally a force of good, or at least he tries to be. Batmite is Batman's #1 fan, and he idolizes the hero. Like Superman's mischievous imp rival, pal, and sometimes enemy, Mr. Mxyzptlk, Batmite is also capable of warping reality, or so it would seem. Later on, his backstory was further complicated when it was suggested that he was merely a hallucination of Batman, a character that represented the rational part of Batman's mind, and existed only in his imagination. Still not known if Batmite is a true character who exists outside of Batman, or simply a character who exists within Batman's psyche. Either way, he's a tough hero to include in the DCEU. Either because he's just crazy powerful, or because it just makes Batman look really crazy and he's like a tiny little, almost cartoon Batman guy. And friends, before we move on to our next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more lists like this list where we talk about the DCEU, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8, Swamp Thing. Swamp Thing may have gotten his own show very briefly as part of the short-lived DC Universe streaming service, which has since been merged with HBO Max and basically no longer exists, but that doesn't mean the hero will be coming to the DCEU anytime soon. Which is a shame too, as that series had amazing reviews, proving just how awesome the depiction of Swamp Thing can be on screen. Swamp Thing was once Alec Holland, a botanist who, after his lab was attacked, was set aflame while doused with his newly invented biorestorative formula. Alec and his wife Linda had created the formula together. When he ran into the swamp, he merged with it, becoming a new sort of life form, a living swamp thing, if you will, which had also merged with Alec's mind. Swamp Thing is an elemental created in part by the Green during its time of need. The Swamp Thing can connect with and control plant life, has super strength, is immortal, can resurrect, and can change size. There's a lot Swamp Thing can do. If I had a Swamp Thing ad where Swamp Thing was like helping you with plants, that's what it would be. Number 7. Zatanna. Zatanna Zatara is one of the greatest magic users that we have in the DC universe. She might be known for performing magic with phrases spoken backwards, but she's actually so accomplished that she actually doesn't even need to speak to cast all of her spells. A bit of a misnomer, although it is the thing we know her for. She can manipulate time, fly, or give the gift of flight to others, travel to other dimensions, heal, and much more. She has knowledge additionally of various different types of magic, including black magic and necromancy. I know we're supposed to be getting a film for Zatanna in the DCEU, like that's a thing that's going to happen, and that it will reportedly have its screenplay written by Emerald Fennell, the director of Promising Young Woman, but we still don't have the film yet, and there have been talks of Zatanna's DCEU film for a while now, so you know, we'll see what happens. I'm just saying, let's not put the cart before the horse, you know what I mean? Despite how powerful she is though, I would definitely love to see Zatanna in action on the big screen. So I do hope the movie does happen. Not saying I don't want it to, I'm just saying, where is Zatanna? Why isn't she there yet? Is it because she's too powerful? Probably. Number 6. Green Lantern. Green Lantern is one of those characters that I'm still amazed we have not yet had in the DCEU. The Lanterns were teased in Zack Snyder's The Justice League, nicknamed the Snyder Cut, but we still have yet to really have them properly introduced in the DCEU or even included. It actually feels a bit strange to me that we have Shazam, but we have no Hal Jordan or Jon Stewart or Kyle Rayner or Guy Gardner. Like, what? This could be because Green Lantern is such a cosmic hero and so powerful that DC might be afraid any film they put the hero in simply would not work. Also, that's a lot of effects if you're going to space, and they have history with, you know, that hero on the big screen. He was initially played by Ryan Reynolds in a non-DCEU related Green Lantern film way back in 2011. It feels like forever ago now, when the MCU was just getting off the ground, and a few years prior to the start of the DCEU itself, with 2013's Man of Steel. Also, oh my goodness, if you go back and watch that movie, like you can see how hard Ryan Reynolds is like trying to be Hal Jordan, and I'm just like, you know what? He actually wasn't a bad Hal Jordan. I don't know if that's a controversial opinion. Number 5. X-Man. I mean, when you have the power of someone like X-Man, it's impossible for you to not be considered unstoppable. X-Man is a reality warping mutant and superhero. He's extremely powerful when it comes to telepathic abilities and telekinetic abilities. Although he isn't always operating on the side of, you know, straight up good, with his morals sometimes getting a little wonky, I would say, like when he thought that, you know, removing love from the world would somehow fix it. At the end of the day, he is generally trying to be a hero and do what he thinks is best. Nate Gray, as he's known, is not from the main continuity, but actually hails from the reality of Earth 295, aka the Age of Apocalypse, and then he kinda got like sucked into the main continuity. In the AOA reality, which stands for Age of Apocalypse respectively, he was created by that world's version of Mr. Sinister, known simply there as Sinister. However, Gray would escape Sinister and end up being raised by mutant hero and one of my fave mutants in general, Forge. So, you know that Gray in general is going to act as a hero because he was raised by one of the best heroes, I'd say. When he did decide to take control of the world, becoming its god and shaping it into what he thought it should be, he was only threatened by basically all of mutant kind coming together to try and stop him. And even then, they failed. That was the only threat that he had, and he was like, well, dealt with that. Of course, while this all sounds kinda evil, becoming basically a tyrant and kinda conquering the world, this was actually done by Nate to fix the world, so it's not as bad as it sounds, really. He was like, look, I'm gonna die soon, and I feel like if I'm gonna die, I need to fix everything. So here I go, I'm gonna try to fix it. And then people were like, yeah, we don't really like when you try to just fix things, Nate. And he was like, okay, well, fair enough, fair enough. Number 4, Deadpool. Deadpool is so unstoppable, it's annoying. He has actively destroyed the Marvel universe before, killing everyone in it. He was was so determined to escape a world that he no longer believed was real. Deadpool is also an immortal being thanks to his healing factor, and for a while thanks to the curse that Thanos put on him. Yeah, that's a true story. Deadpool was getting a little too cozy with death, and Thanos did not like that. That's because Thanos has always had a thing for Mistress Death, and is always trying to win her favor so that they can one day be together. Maybe one day. Thanos has an unhealthy obsession with death, I would say. So Thanos, when his potential future relationship status was threatened, decided to curse Deadpool so that he couldn't die, thereby preventing him ending up with death and keeping the two of them apart. Deadpool for a while was human, and it was during this time that Wade Wilson became a lot more squishy, and I suppose stoppable. But even then, he didn't end up dying, but instead would be reverted back to getting his powers, going from handsome mortal Wade Wilson back to kinda ugly, unkillable Wade Wilson. Oh my gosh. When are we getting the Immortal Deadpool book, I wonder? That could be a whole book. Someone write that. Mortal Deadpool. Number 3, Magneto. I mean, Magneto literally kept himself alive through sheer willpower and massive control of his powers. I think that means he deserves his spot on this list. And for those who might think, yeah, but is Magneto a hero, Amanda? I would say that you could argue for him being on either side, really, hero and villain. Magneto throughout most of modern comics has been villain and hero, but he also kept his blood pumping without a heart to face off against Uranos, which was a heroic feat. So even if you perhaps disagree with my categorization of him on this list, I think you at least have to give him some hero props for doing that, and perhaps at least, you know, I would say a good amount of hero points. Hero points that Magneto has truthfully been racking up over the years, especially recently in the comics. After initially facing Uranos, Magneto was left for dead, which was a mistake on Uranos' part to assume this during the AXE Judgment Day event. As we've learned from Zombieland, you always gotta double tap, aka confirm that kill. It is important, especially if you're facing off against Magneto. Uranos did not follow this rule, assuming Magneto was dead after he took his heart, and as a result, Magneto came back to finish him. Magneto basically used his powers to keep his blood moving throughout his body by controlling the small bits of iron in his bloodstream to basically keep it pumping without having an actual organ to do it for him. Literally heartless Magneto, which sounds terrifying. Later, using all his strength and a power boost from Storm, Magneto was able to defeat the Eternal Villain before he passed away. But I'm sure he'll be back eventually because he is Magneto and he's a pretty great character, so. Number 2, Wolverine. I would say Wolverine is probably one of the most unstoppable heroes that we have over at Marvel Comics. He is a master tracker and is determined when it comes to defeating whoever stands in his way, or when it comes to saving the day. And even when he ends up being brainwashed and used as a weapon, he ends up not letting that stop him, at least not in the main continuity. Although in some of those alternate worlds, he definitely has been brainwashed to the point that he had to be put down. And by Kitty Pryde, no less, in one of them. Ugh, that hurts my heart. That being said, even in alternate worlds where he has become like Lord of the Vampires, he was able and willing to rise up to defeat his fellow evil brethren, even though he knew it would also mean his own death as well, potentially. That's how determined Wolverine is. He's also virtually unkillable. Well, I guess unless you drown him. But even then, Wolverine has fallen into oceans and washed up miles off on another shore unscathed, so for a man that can still be drowned, I mean, he does pretty well to make it out alive of those underwater situations. Number 1, Hulk. I mean, we can't do a list like this and not talk about Hulk, am I right? The Hulk is not just a powerful hero, but he's also a stubborn and determined one. We've seen this shine through not just in his Hulk persona, but also as Bruce Banner before as well, but especially as the Hulk. Let's turn to World War Hulk as an example. In this story, Hulk was shot off planet by the Illuminati and ended up in Sakaar. He not only rose above being a gladiator, helping to lead a rebellion and an uprising, but after Sakaar was destroyed from a ship exploding, Hulk was determined to get back at those who had sent him there in the first place, and then later seemingly ruined his happiness, even though that isn't quite what happened, but that's what the Hulk thought happened, and that's all that really matters. He returns to Earth to get revenge on the Illuminati, and he proves just how deadly he can be. It also goes to show us why you really do not want to make the Hulk angry, because he might just squash you like a bug. He threatens the lives of some of the greatest heroes. When it comes to confronting even Professor X, Hulk manages to take on the mutants who come to his aid, and single-handedly does so, not being defeated by a physical show of power, but instead kinda by a speech about how the mutants, don't really deserve his ire. When it comes to Bruce Banner, we've seen his unstoppable nature as is showcased in the recent Hulk series by Donny Cates and Ryan Ottley, where Bruce turns Hulk's body into his own spaceship, and his mind into the ship's engine, with Bruce remaining in control at the helm, which is pretty crazy. Also, I mean, Bruce kinda took on Thor in a fight at one point and was like, look, I might be Bruce Banner, but give me all the information about how the Hulk fights. I'm a smart guy and I can use that knowledge to basically face off with the Hulk.
Kicking off the list at number 10, Moonstone. She made her first debut in Captain America issue 192. Carla Sofen was a psychiatrist, but instead of helping her patients, she sent them into paranoia instead. So the worst doctor ever, that's great. This life choice led her down the path to become a villain, obviously, starting with an assistant position to the Dr. Faustus. So eventually she made her way to Lloyd Block, the original Moonstone. Then she poisoned him with hallucinogens, and then she made him hand over the Moonstone, which was a Kree device that grants the users like tons of powers. So we can see this exchange go down in the Incredible Hulk issue 299. She gives the Hulk a run for his money. She then joined the Masters of Evil and went up against the Avengers numerous times. She was one of the villains that stepped up once the Avengers went missing. She was on the Thunderbolts team, referring to herself as Meteorite, which sounds almost more scary, more villainous than anything. And before we go on with this list of Hulk villains, guys, if you want to go ahead and smash that like button, Hulk smash that like button, if I may, because it helps out our channel tons here. You guys are the best. Thank you so much for watching. Now let's get back to this list already. Number 9. UFOs. Yes, one of the biggest Hulk villains is a group of UFOs flying in the sky, God forbid. No, the UFOs made their first comic book debut in Incredible Hulk issue 254. They were inspired by the Fantastic Four's origin story, okay? So they were power hungry and they went to great lengths to get it. Now their plan was to recreate that same accident that gave the Fantastic Four their powers. I mean, they even went so far as to get the same engineers that built the original shuttle. So they were pretty committed. Their attempt was going well until, of course, Dr. Banner intervened. He thought the group had been exposed by accident, and when he found their ground control facility, he did the hero thing and brought the shuttle safely back down in order to save their lives. But they didn't want to be saved. They got powers, however, all 4 of them got powers, and when they saw Banner was the one to interrupt them from perhaps even getting more powers, they lashed out at him. And they went on to call themselves the UFOs. Number 8. Tyrannus. He made his first comic book debut in Incredible Hulk issue 5. Romulus Augustulus was the last emperor of the Roman Empire. He was born a little bit before us, back in the year 463 AD, so he's kind of old, a little bit. At just the age 12, he took the throne. Age 12! That's some Game of Thrones stuff right there. I bet he was a better leader than Joffrey still. So he had the throne, but nobody took him seriously because, well, yeah, he was 12. He's trying to knight people and like his hands are small. He's like, what? Who are you? What are you doing? Get out of here. You're nothing. So he ruled for about 12 months, and then his father was defeated by the German Goth Adoaker, which kicked off the Dark Ages in Europe. He was then banished from the kingdom where little 12-year-old Romulus swore to return. And he did. He returned in the 6th century as Tyrannus, when he became a servant of Pluto, who empowered him and sent him to destroy Merlin. Like the magician Merlin. Merlin whooped his ass and then banished Romulus, or Tyrannus, beneath the earth to a realm called Subterranea. Now while under there, he found a bunch of deviant technology, and then he attacked Earth, finding the Fountain of Youth along the way, which made him young forever, made him young for centuries, and then eventually he ended up kidnapping Betty Ross and holding her as hostage in order to try and conquer the United States, which got the big green guy on his radar. Number 7, Bi-Beast. This guy is wild. Okay, so the Bi-Beast started off as an android with 2 heads. So he had a head here and then a head here. Now the top head has knowledge of warfare, and the bottom head has knowledge of culture. It was created by the bird people, the avian race that were subspecies of the Inhumans. Now he's only around for one comic, that comic being the Incredible Hulk issue 169. Nice. So once the bird people had all passed away, this android was left in the floating city of Erie. And then later down the road, Bi-Beast saw the heartbeat with Banner and got some flashbacks to its bird masters, so it captured them both and demanded that Banner uses his brain to fix the decaying machines in the city. So Banner didn't do that. Instead, he cured the Harpy back into Betty Ross mode, which angered Beast even more. So now there's a fight with the Hulk and this two-headed monster. It got pretty distracted when AIM was striking down on the city in a force led by MODOK, and he got stressed out and this thing straight up blew itself up. He's like, damn, the city's being attacked, Bruce Banner's got hands, ugh, see ya. But wait, there's more. See, the bird people actually created a second Beast, which did survive and kept going after the Hulk and other heroes. We love backups. Can't go wrong with backups. Number 6, Piecemeal. He first entered the world of comics with Incredible Hulk issue 407. Piecemeal was created by scientists working for the Red Skull in the Amazon jungle. He's a cyborg villain with claws that can cut through anything, your hopes and dreams, whatever, you name it, it'll cut right through. Now they wanted to use him as this being, this artificial being with all the abilities of the New World Order members included. Now they started to work on Project Piecemeal, but one of these scientists, Madman, rather fitting name, went a little bit too far, and without anybody knowing, he planted a device in Piecemeal so the android would follow his commands only. Kind of like Ultron almost, but with less James Spader and more gunslinger, you know? Piecemeal tried to escape this lab numerous times. One time the Juggernaut fought back and sent him back to the lab, and he's not having an easy go. Even when he tries to get out, it's not easy. So Piecemeal eventually grabbed onto the bottom of a plane and snuck out of Brazil and headed to Europe, where he visited the one place he would go to, you know, Loch Ness, and then he frightened tourists. That's when the Hulk came around and the two fought it out. So when Piecemeal changed his appearance to match the Hulk's, it distracted Banner long enough for the scientist to knock Banner out. That madman scientist knocked him right out. He didn't use a blow dart. I don't know why I did that, but I feel like we should use more blow darts. Number 5, Atrocitus. What a name! Okay, he must be a gentle soul. Atrocitus entered DC Comics back in Green Lantern Volume 4, Issue 25. He is the leader and founder of the Red Lantern Corps, the Red Power Ring fueled by nothing else but rage. So since the death of his family, he's been after the Guardians of the Universe. His family was residing in the ever so peaceful sector 666. Krona, one of the Guardians of the Universe who I talked about in part 1, reprogrammed Manhunters to extinguish life. So when they all went nuts, this was one of the many worlds destroyed. He was one of the 5 survivors left on Sector 666, so together they became the 5 Inversions. They soon became known as the Empire of Tears, which sounds like a punk rock boy band, but in reality they were performing rituals to see the future, like the Blackest Night Prophecy and stuff like that. Atrocitus created the Red Lantern Corps, but he's also really known for corrupting Sinestro. Number 4, Oblivion. Making his first appearance in Green Lantern New Guardians Annual Issue 2 back in 2014, Oblivion is made of Kyle Rayner's rage, fear, and anxiety, all rolled into one. Lovely. He's the physical form of all those traits, and he even believed himself to be Kyle Rayner. He stayed at this guy's apartment, and he even tricked Carol into thinking that he was the real deal. He has powers that allow him to shapeshift, obviously, but he can also teleport and project vast amounts of energy that match a white lantern. He can also create illusions of objects and people. He can make anything he wants. You're going to be very confused if you go on a dinner date with this guy. One day, Oblivion teleported Carol and himself to Arizona, where he used his powers to change everybody's appearance, and he even changed buildings all around him. No thanks, we don't want any of that in the DCEU. Sounds fun, but sounds kinda unfixable. Number 3, Mongol. The insane ruler of Warworld. Yeah, he's for sure making this list. He first appeared back in the 80s in DC Comics Presents issue 27. He was a Superman villain who was exiled into outer space by his own people. A man called the Archimandrite came along, took it over, and from that point on the planet was just a cruel wasteland. Mongol drifted through space, and over his cosmic commute he picked up immense powers along the way until he eventually arrived on the 5th planet of the Cygnus system, where the Martian race protected the Crystal Key. The Crystal Key was the only way to gain access to the planet Warworld. So Mongol kidnapped Jimmy Olsen, Lois Lane, and Steve Lombard in order to get Superman to punch those Martians out of the way. Martian Manhunter ended up freeing Superman's friends, but by the time everything was done, they were all so low energy that they still couldn't fight Mongol, so he got the key and teleported away. It took both Superman and Supergirl to destroy Warworld, but Mongol ended up escaping anyways. I think I like this guy, but he might be a bit too strong for the DCEU, but hey, never say never. Number 2, Kronos. If you do the crime, you're doing the time, but if you have enough time, you can plan said crime out in detail, and maybe you won't even get caught for that crime. Confused? That's what time does. David Clinton first entered DC Comics with the Atom issue 3. He's mainly a villain for Ray Palmer. Now he was a criminal his entire life, but finally he was arrested, thrown in the slammer where he had time to think. maybe a bit too much time, because then he reflected on all of his past crimes and what he would have done differently had he planned it better. And he used his skills and obsessions with timepieces to work non-stop in the prison workshop. So we learned about Crocs, time, anything, the mechanisms within them, all that good stuff. And when his sentence was up, he was released and then became a time-traveling villain. He used time-inspired weapons, like literally, he used an exploding hourglass or a wristwatch filled with blades instead of hands, and he also had a device that could literally slow down time. And then he started going by the new name Kronos. In the DC animated universe, he used these devices to go back in time and steal rare relics from the past. At one point he tried stealing a utility belt from the Justice League's watchtower, but when he was interrupted he made a break for it through a time vortex, but Green Lantern, Batman, and Wonder Woman followed him back through there. We mentioned a time guy on part 1, so part 2, we gotta throw another one in. It's the law. And finally, number 1, Grail. We finally got to see Darkseid in the Snyder Cut, but is it too soon perhaps if we meet his daughter? Am I asking for too much? I don't know. She's pretty badass. She made her comic book debut in Justice League Volume 2 issue 40 back in 2015. She was born at the exact same time as Wonder Woman in Divergence issue 1. The Amazonian assassin Marina gave birth to Grail in secret with help from Penelope and Menelipe. Marina had to defend her child because Penelope heard the prophecy from Menelipe, so apparently this child would cause mass destruction when she grew up. Okay, sure. Marina took Menelipe out, so she wasn't really a concern anymore, but afterwards Marina left Themyscira with her daughter, making it the first time Amazons have left the island. In Justice League Volume 2, issue 40, Grail teamed up with the Anti-Monitor and declared war on her own father. Nice. Being a hybrid of an Amazon and a new god, she's got powers from both. It's quite intimidating. She's destroyed Wonder Woman's bracelets with Omega Beams, and she can travel through dimensions by locking onto those connected to the Speed Force. She can literally hitch a ride through time, so there's no winning this battle, either in the future or the past.
Number 10, Quasar. Quasar is Wendell Vaughn, a being of pure quantum energy. When armed with his quantum bands, he is even more powerful. The quantum bands allow Quasar to create constructs and shields. They also give him the power to absorb energy and complete quantum jumps, effectively teleporting. Quasar managed to survive in a fight against Annihilus, attempting to teleport away before he was destroyed, but only managing to do so at the last minute with his mind. For a time, he'd become trapped in the negative zone mentally, ceasing to have a physical form, passing on the mantle of Quasar for a time to Phyla-Vell and Nova's Richard Rider after. However, Quasar's defeat during Annihilation would seemingly only make him stronger, as after a time he managed to somehow regain his physical form, returning only to go on a journey to the Cancerverse, acting as a scout for his own universe. Existing as a being of pure quantum energy means that Quasar is a powerful hero to go up against, and might make him too powerful for the Marvel Cinematic Universe in the end. Good old Wendell. Number 9, Gladiator. Gladiator is one of those heroes whose powers are only limited by his own state of mind. Literally. Gladiator's confidence is directly tied to his power levels, and the more confident that he feels, the more unstoppable he becomes. For a time, Gladiator actually ruled his people as the Magister of the Shi'ar Empire, out in space. But more recently, he decided to step down, believing that Anarimani was needed on the throne, and relinquishing his place to Xandra. Gladiator himself is Kalark, a Strontian, who went through an enhancement process to make him worthy of the rank of Gladiator. He is immensely powerful, being super strong, fast, agile, invulnerable, and possessing a healing factor. He is capable of interstellar flight and is an incredibly gifted and experienced fighter. And friends, if you are liking this list and you want more lists like it, if you want that part 3, I don't know if we can do one, but I mean there's a lot of characters in the Marvel Universe, so I'm sure we can. Be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8, Black Bolt. Black Bolt is the king of the Inhumans. We probably won't see him anytime soon in the MCU, not just because you'd then have to explain all about the Inhumans and what they're up to, and because he's super OP and can wipe out most opponents with just a whisper, but because we already tried to introduce the world to the Inhumans via their own television series, and it did not go well. Black Bolt, however, still has some pretty cool powers, and the Inhumans are a pretty cool bunch, if we did feel that they might be a good fit. We just might have to tone down Black Bolt's powers somewhat, or maybe also find like another way to have them? I don't know. He was considered considered powerful enough to take on Thanos, and he even survived a one-on-one battle against him in the comics. He was able to shatter Thanos' armor during their fight, though his powerful voice did not harm the Mad Titan directly. Rats. He also seemingly killed one of the most powerful Omega-level mutants around, Vulcan, who was on part 1 of our list. However, this was later retconned to not have actually happened, as we later learned during Hickman's reign over the X-books that Vulcan actually survived the fight. Apparently. He looked pretty dead. It looked like he was pretty dead, but he survived. How? We don't know. Number 7, Starbrand. Another cosmic hero who right now is in the care, I suppose, of the Avengers is Starbrand. Well, one of the Starbrands. There have been other Starbrands before in Marvel Comics, but this one is unique in the sense that she is just a little baby, or maybe more of a toddler now, actually. Either way, it would be pretty weird to see such a powerful young one fighting as a member of the Avengers, unless we're thinking of going the route of Baby Yoda, I guess, aka Grogu in Star Wars. Still, it seems unlikely. Whether it's little baby Selby or Kevin Connor, it's very unlikely that we're going to get either of the Starbrands out in the MCU. Their invulnerability, super strength, matter manipulation, energy manipulation, cosmic awareness, and healing powers may simply just be too much for the MCU to handle. Sorry, Starbrands. Number 6, Hyperion. Hyperion is known for being Marvel's version of a literal Superman. Sure, we have Sentry and Captain America, who are comparable in terms of their powers and their role, but Hyperion in the newest Heroes Reborn series seemed to be really exuding those Superman vibes. Here, Hyperion was the leader of the Squadron Supreme of America, an elite team of heroes who were also all kinda messed up. Hyperion himself seemingly had a god complex that perhaps was well earned considering what he was capable of. When all their enemies escaped their negative zone prison, Mark Milton as Hyperion was the first to respond, and he handedly took down pretty much everyone who got out, including Galactus, a version of Gladiator, a version of the Beyonder, a Giant Man version of Ultron / Evil Hank Pym, and a version of the Annihilation Wave. Granted, this Hyperion technically is an alt version, but either way you slice it, either way you dice it, any version of the hero is really too powerful and likely too similar to DC's Supes to make an appearance in the MCU.
In at number 5 is Martian Manhunter. John Johns is another character that people really sleep on, but this guy is insane with his level of ability. There's a panel from the New 52 when Martian Manhunter is fighting off all the members of the Justice League at the same time. Let me break this down. With his left hand, Martian Manhunter is displaying his shapeshifting abilities, turning into a massive spiky club and whacking away both Cyborg and Hal Jordan Green Lantern. With his right hand, I think it's safe to say he's showing off his super strength, as he's got a power grip on the lasso of truth, and I'm assuming he's resisting its power, which is just a whole feat on its own. Behind him is Aquaman, who's like jabbing at Johns with his trident, but this is just going through the Martian Manhunter and is showing off his intangibility powers. And then we got Superman, who's flying around the fight at a decent distance away while Manhunter is using his heat vision to keep him there. And then the funniest part is Batman doing absolutely nothing, just picking up the Flash, who seems to have just been knocked down. It's almost a perfect display of his abilities, but leaving out a handful, and one of the biggest. John is the most powerful telepath on Earth, and one of the most powerful in the universe. Martian Manhunter has been called the most powerful being on the planet, and he's at the top of the list of people that Superman is afraid to fight. That's enough said right there. Number 4, Orion. Orion is a new god and the son of Darkseid, and as such he's not only incredibly conflicted, but also incredibly powerful. He has many forms and he has many abilities. Orion is repeatedly praised and stated to be a warrior with, quote, skill and ferocity second to none, which allowed him to become the greatest warrior on Apokolips while he was undercover there. He is so astronomically strong that he has held open the hand of the god of strength and might, who had been threatening creation and ripping holes in reality with that strength. And he has stood against and beaten a sun-charged Superman one-on-one, something no one else in the Justice League was able to do. His durability is so powerful that he can tank star system destroying explosions. Orion is so fast that he moves with the speed of thought, and he's so smart that he was able to create the Genesis box, which can destroy and rebuild a universe. He can grow and shrink to any size, powers, move through time, has a healing factor as if he actually needed one, has incredible super senses, and wields the Astro Force, which does a hell of a lot on top of everything, including matter and energy manipulation. But as an example, it once sealed holes in reality and knocked out Superman in a single shot. And that's all just Orion holding back and not using his true power called the Source of the Beast. And yet, he flies around space on a stupid looking scooter. And at number 3 is The Flash. Okay, look, I gotta tell you now that I'm actually gonna be talking about Wally West here. It's pretty well known that Wally is even faster than Barry Allen is, and I'd argue that he is the fastest speedster anywhere. In Flash Forward, Wally somehow went, quote, faster than the Speed Force, which means he went faster than the source of his own super speed. That makes no freaking sense! He can outrun Superman and Barry Allen. He outran the Black Flash, which is basically death, taking it to the end of the universe where it just ceased to exist. He has saved the Titans, who are all over the US, and he did it in 6.25 seconds. And my favorite point, there was a time that he saved the whole population of a city from a nuclear explosion as that explosion was going off, and he did it at like 1 billion times the speed of light. How does that even make sense? It doesn't. That's your answer. Wally West is insane. He can manipulate the Speed Force to make time basically irrelevant to himself, and he might as well just be classified as a god. Number 2, Firestorm. Where do we start with Firestorm? The main version of the character is Ronnie Raymond, who was fused with his professor Martin Stein. But there are a lot of other versions of Firestorm, a lot of whom are either one person or different fusions of people. It's annoyingly complex. The character, as you might guess, has pyrokinetic abilities plus durability, flight, reflexes, and super strength, but the character's main thing is that they can rearrange the molecules of matter. Now this ability is obviously incredibly OP, and it would simply take one story to make him completely god level, but for the most part, writers kind of misuse him. Potentially, this character could transform entire planets into whatever he wanted. With his powers, Firestorm's done some pretty godlike things. For example, Firestorm manifested a pink bunny mascot suit out of thin air around the villain's Skull Crusher. He's turned explosives into a jack-in-the-box and a cement truck into a giant teddy bear. It's hilarious, but like low-key, absolutely insane. On a way less hilarious note though, he also turned a girl into salt when he was resurrected as Deathstorm, and in Doomsday Clock, Firestorm accidentally turned a crowd of Russian protesters into glass. But outside of matter manipulation, Firestorm has had some impressive feats, like surviving the nuclear meltdown that originally created the hero and absorbing all the excess radiation, and then another time, Firestorm survived a straight-on nuclear explosion. An alternate version of the character called Deathstorm was able to absorb and capture 3 different Justice League teams into its Firestorm matrix, allowing the crime syndicate to take over Earth for a period of time. And in Infinite Crisis, Firestorm was able to seal a multiversal rift. Now in case you haven't noticed, we have kind of moved away from physically unstoppable characters to characters that are just pure science fiction gods. And at number 1 is Captain Atom. Nathaniel Atom was transformed into Captain Atom in the 60s after being semi-forced to participate in a potentially fatal experiment, piloting a device encased in an alien metal. Now the experiment didn't kill him. What it did do was atomize him and bond the alien metal to his flesh, giving him superpowers. Captain Atom's powers are like Firestorm's powers, but boosted to a whole different level, and with many more side abilities. Matter manipulation, energy manipulation, time manipulation, energy absorption, telepathy, spatial manipulation, quantum manipulation, force field creation, magic and mind manipulation, and control of the quantum field are all on this guy's roster of abilities. These powers have let him perform some insane feats like creating and destroying whole universes, fighting Superboy Prime, easily defeating a team composed of multiple versions of himself before absorbing them and creating an explosion powerful enough to destroy a universal space-time continuum. Captain Atom is potentially the most powerful superhero, certainly the most powerful who is also a member of the Justice League.
Kicking off the list at number 10, we have the Absorbing Man. Carl Crusher Creel already sounds intimidating enough. The Absorbing Man made his comic book debut back in Journey into Mystery issue 114. He was raised in the Bronx, and at a young age his mother passed away, and his father certainly wasn't there for him after. He was not a role model as well, to say the least. So sadly, Carl turned to the life of crime in order to pay the bills, and while he was spending time in the gym, he realized he was actually a pretty great boxer. He did so well that he became known as Crusher Creel, but that life of crime was still sprinkled in there, and then he was recruited as an enforcer for the Owl's men. He eventually got caught and locked up, but this is when things start going a little bit fun in a way. See, Loki, Loki's a god of mischief, he added this rare Asgardian herb to Karl's drinking water in hopes that he would get this new ability to take down Thor. Now, this new ability made him the Absorbing Man, a guy who could absorb the physical properties of anybody that he came into contact with. His first battle was with Thor, and then when he came back to Earth, he went toe-to-toe with the Hulk. I'd love an Absorbing Man in the MCU, honestly. I feel like I could watch 2 movies with Karl just fist-bumping all of our Avengers and causing chaos, taking powers, of course. And before we go on to number 9, if you guys could go ahead and toss this video a thumbs up, that would be great because those likes do wonders for our page. You guys are the best. Thank you so much. Now back to some more Hulk villains. Number 9, Speed Freak. Making his first debut in Incredible Hulk issue 388, Speed Freak aka Joss Shapp was a criminal who at one point got addicted to the substance called Snap. Oh snap. This plus the fact that he stole a super suit from an inventor sounds like a perfect supervillain origin story in the making. So Speed Freak had been hired by a man named Mr. Lang, and one of his first jobs was to attack a guy who had infected Mr. Lang's son. So Speed Freak went to fight it out, and while there, he had the misfortune of crossing paths with the Incredible Hulk, who tossed Speed Freak quite the distance. So his suit alone gives Speed Freak quite the advantage. It gives him the ability to hover above the ground, flying, literally being able to fly, and he also has arm-mounted adamantium cutting blades, so he might be a bit too crazy for the MCU, at least right now. Number 8, The Leader. Samuel Stearns, aka The Leader, made his first debut in Tales to Astonish, issue 62. He was working one night at a chemical research plant, and when he was moving canisters of waste material, one of the containers, bam, they broke open and then covered him in gamma radiation. Stearns survived just like Banner did, but it affected him in a different way. He went from being smart to becoming a genius, and his brain could absorb more and more information. It was his superpower. And it got to a point where his physical body started to mutate, so now he has this giant green brain head. I mean, he clearly looks like a villain, and then he started to refer to himself as the Leader, using his intellect to become a criminal mastermind. He clashed with the other Gamma guy, Banner. In fact, he actually ruined Betty and Bruce's wedding. What a jerk. Number 7, Greg Gargoyle. He made his first comic book debut with Journey into Mystery issue 107. Greg Gargoyle, aka Dr. Paul Duval, was a young chemist working for a pharmaceutical company in Paris, and when he spilt a contaminated potion on his right hand, it started to turn into this stone-like material. Not like Medusa though, where you're stone and immobile. Dr. Greg Gargoyle McGee was actually able to move whilst maintaining the stone form. So he looks scary and he actually can do some damage. But everything he touched turned into this stone stuff. And it's super scary to have this happen, but I can't help but chuckle at how human Greg is when this transformation happens. He's like, oh no, my hand. Oh no, my other hand. Shoot, what do I do? Oh no, my face. That's like when they said you shouldn't touch your face during COVID-19. I'm like, what do I do with my hands? How do I act normal? What have I been doing for 26 years? What's going on? So Greg has a few good ideas with this ability. He tossed a stone airplane at his enemies, so that's a cool thing he can do. And then in the Incredible Hulk issue 363, Greg uses his powers to take down the Hulk. It's not easy, but it sure makes it easier when the Hulk is literally stoned during the fight. Number 6, Nightmare. Making his first debut back in Strange Tales issue 110, Nightmare's origin remains a mystery, and it's only known to few. He's both a conceptual entity, part of all of existence, just like eternity, and he's also a deity. So the guy's just trouble. He's just trouble. He was born in the Ever and I dimension, and he was seen as a cousin to the Dweller in Darkness. He knew Dweller's origins. He wanted no part in all that stuff. Nightmare has crossed paths with the Hulk many times. At one point, he caused the Hulk to have these hallucinations, and of course, he had nightmares for years, because his name's Nightmare. You get it. Even Betty Ross, Bruce's love, isn't safe from Nightmare. Nightmare once entered her mind and did horrible things to her while she was dreaming. He's kind of like Freddy Krueger, and seeing as WandaVision didn't want to bring in Nightmare when they had a good chance to, it's probably best if the Hulk and Betty never met him as well. Number 5, Necron. Also known as the Lord of the Unliving, Great. Necron made his first appearance in Tales of the Green Lantern Corps issue 2. He's literally the embodiment of death. Necron figured out the land of the living existed after the death of an immortal caused a rift to open between dimensions. So Necron saw all this life and he was like, this looks tasty. He wanted it. Well, really he wanted to master it and get out of his hell, was literal hell that he was living in. So he resurrected Krona, even throwing in a classy army of the dead to assist in taking down the Guardians of the Universe. Taking them down ended up widening the rift, so it took all the Green Lantern Corps to stop them, but even after winning, countless lives were lost in this fight. Hal Jordan ended up going to the land of the unliving, accepting the possibility that he may just never return, and there he gathered the souls of other fallen lanterns, and it was just enough to fight off Necron and return, with the Guardians sealing the rift promptly afterwards. But like Necron says, you can never defeat death. Back in 2009, it was revealed Necron was behind the Black Lanterns and instigated the Blackest Night event. There he took over the bodies of Wonder Woman and Superman while also bringing back dead heroes to join his side. Number 4. Prometheus. Helmets are pretty important, especially in combat, and especially if one helmet in particular gave you the skills to beat, I don't know, Batman. Prometheus first appeared in New Year's Evil, Prometheus issue 1 back in the late 90s, and at first he was just the son of two criminals who traveled across the US, real Bonnie and Clyde style. But as a kid he would have to go with them, right, because they couldn't afford a babysitter. They were rich with like mob money, but they couldn't afford a babysitter. Okay, so eventually the police caught on and they were never seen again. The police killed them in front of the boy, almost like a darker Bruce Wayne origin. So he grew up with their fortune, only it was a stolen fortune. Then he traveled the world, trained as a fighter, trained as a mercenary. He learned a dozen different languages and he was pretty skilled by the end of it. Then he found the ancient city of Shambhala where their monks studied evil. They trusted him and showed him their greatest treasure, which was an alien ship. Not too bad. Their leader was actually an alien in disguise. He landed there, but Prometheus had to kill him to obtain the key to enter the Ghost Zone. The Ghost Zone was this infinite expanse of white emptiness, the space between dimensions. Kryptonians called this the Phantom Zone. And in there, Prometheus built himself a house, a costume, and his first advanced helmet that downloads info to take on the Justice League. He was great, like he shot Martian Manhunter so then he couldn't change, he infected Steel's armor with a virus, he hypnotized Huntress, and he hit Green Lantern with a neural shaft so his ring was useless. He also trapped Zuriel in said Ghost Zone and beat Batman with hand-to-hand combat. Not too shabby at all. Number 3. The Batman Who Laughs. We've seen quite a few Batman on screen. We're even seeing Michael Keaton return to Gotham in the next Flash movie, which is pretty exciting. But the Batman Who Laughs, aka The Darkest Knight, might be a bit too hardcore for the theaters. Coming from the Dark Multiverse, first appearing in Dark Days The Casting, created by Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo, comes a twisted Earth 22 version of the Batman Who Laughs. The Joker here is insane. He goes on this spree throughout Gotham, just chaos in the streets. He took out Jim Gordon, then he poisoned Batman. It was all bad, and then once Batman was able to move again after the poison had run its course, he broke the Joker's neck, which is already immediately so dark. But even the Joker was prepared after death. After that snap, he let out this toxic breath that let everybody near him get infected, including Batman. Cut to 2 days later, Batman and Superman are talking about what happened, and when Superman tells Bruce that a kid infected by Joker bit a doctor, Bruce ends up laughing, like this maniacal laugh. And he catches himself after, he's like, sorry about that. Superman knows something's off here, but a day later, Bruce called the team to the Batcave and went full-on Omni-Man. He took out the entire team before anybody caught on to his new and violent personality. Number 2. The Anti-Monitor. Making his first appearance in Crisis on Infinite Earths issue 2, the Anti-Monitor was DC's excuse to cut out a lot of fat from the comics, basically. The multiverse was introduced back in the 60s. The Golden Age heroes were residing on Earth 2, and then came Earth 3, and then so on and danforth. So when Crisis on Infinite Earths came around, DC Comics introduced this big bad cosmic villain to set something straight going forward. Clean up the multiple timelines, makes sense. Now it all started when Krona performed this experiment. They wanted to see the origin of the universe, but instead an opposite universe was created, the antimatter universe. Anti-Monitor wanted nothing but death and destruction, and after battling his brother for, say, I don't know, 1 billion years, they both fell unconscious. And then 9 billion years later, they were woken up. When they tried to destroy Earth 1, many heroes lost their lives, and in order to stop that chaos, Superman had to punch them into a star. Who knows, with the Flash opening up the multiversal door, we could see him on the big screen in our lifetime. Maybe. And finally, number 1. Perpetua. Of course, one of the most feared beings in the greater Omniverse. Also known as the First Creator, she made her first appearance in Justice League Volume 4, Issue 8. She was the mother of the Monitor, Anti-Monitor, and World Folder. She was actually one of the hands that created the multiverse, literally. Each member were these celestial beings and they would pass on and their energy would return to the source, but Perpetua was different. She wanted a dark, vicious reality that would live forever. So she created the first iteration of the multiverse using negative crisis energies and then had 3 cosmic children. She was creating an army also to rule over the multiverse, so her children snitched. Yeah, they told the judges of the source, and Perpetua was locked away outside the source wall with her negative energies. But even locked away, she was able to connect to Lex Luthor, who believed freeing her would make him a hero on some multiversal scale. So next time you want to kick somebody out of your party, just banish them to the source wall with their negative energy. That's how he works.
Number 10, Powerhouse. It feels weird to have Franklin Richards at the bottom of a too powerful or most powerful style list. However, while Powerhouse was once one of the most powerful heroes in all of the Marvel Universe, even becoming so when he was just a little baby, so much so that his dad, Reed, actually had to shut off his son's powers, he has been having a rough go in the comics over the last little while. Franklin was believed to be a mutant with the power to warp reality, giving him access to a ton of extra power. But unfortunately, his powers have been on the fritz recently, and now he seems to have completely lost them. It's even believed that he was never truly a mutant, but instead subconsciously used his powers to alter his DNA, meaning that he can't even go to Krakoa currently anymore. I wouldn't expect us to see any kind of reality warping version of Franklin in the Fantastic Four film, if we get a version of him there at all. Although honestly, depowering him in the comics may be part of a plot to have him come into the film, more comic book accurate to who he is currently in the comics, meaning production and writers wouldn't actually have to worry about his crazy powers and writing those in, which would likely get in the way of any massive threat, as while powered, he could normally stop, well, just about any of them, like that. No Infinity Gauntlet snaps, but just normal power reality warping snaps. Number 9, Rachel Summers. Rachel is 1, really powerful, and 2, just pretty unusual, which makes her a hard sell for the Marvel Cinematic Universe on both those fronts. Although the mutants will be coming soon, so there is a small chance, I suppose, that Rachel could show up at some point. Rachel isn't from the main continuity of Earth 616, but is the daughter of Jean Grey and Scott Summers, aka Cyclops, of her own reality, Earth 811. Rachel is considered to be Omega level, so in theory, the highest level there is of mutant, although there are a few who threaten to surpass that level in the comics. She is an insanely powerful telepath, telekinetic, and can also manipulate time, even being capable of traveling through it. Rachel can also shield herself against time manipulation from outside forces, protecting her against alterations to the timeline. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more lists about all the cool things happening in the MCU, or not happening in this case, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8, Squirrel Girl. It feels weird putting Squirrel Girl on this list, but she is weirdly one of the most OP heroes we have in the comics. Squirrel Girl is a hero who can pretty much defeat any threat she goes up against without usually even needing to fight. She handily defeated Dr. Doom using her influence over squirrels, and defeated Galactus just by having a conversation with him and being overall fearless. Squirrel Girl usually befriends many other heroes and villains alike whom she meets, which tends to be her secret weapon when it comes to winning any fight. Doreen Green is also a kind of odd hero, so we likely won't be seeing her in the MCU anytime soon for that reason as well. But honestly, I kind of wish that we would. She might be odd and weirdly OP, but she's also had a lot of great moments in the comics, and it would be really cool to see her cheerful, awkward, and infectiously fun nature come to life on the big screen. Number 7, Vulcan. Vulcan is another mutant who is likely considered too powerful and possibly too complicated to show up in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I know we are getting mutants, so likely a lot of these folks could be showing up at some point, but I don't know if Vulcan's gonna be one of them. Vulcan is not only Omega level, but is actually implied to be one of the few that I mentioned earlier who could potentially be past, or at least at times surpass, Omega levels. He is one of the coolest power sets in comics, which is also shared by other super awesome but perhaps less mainstream mutants such as Bishop. I love Bishop. He's another mutant that I would love to see show up in the MCU with the X-Men crew at some point. I mean, we did get Cable and Deadpool, so I feel like that could be possible. Vulcan has no limit to the type of energy he can absorb and utilize, even being able to harness magical or cosmic energy from the likes of Adam Warlock, although I do believe he does have limits when it comes to how much energy he can harness or utilize. Vulcan also can use his powers to reduce or even turn off the powers of those that he faces. Vulcan is Gabriel Summers, the mysterious younger brother of both Scott and Alex Summers. The one that for years we were like, does he exist? Why did Mr. Sinister randomly mention him and then we just never saw him? And then he finally showed up. In the 2000s, he was like, hey, just been here all along, doing other stuff in space, being real messed up. Number 6. Sentry. The Sentry would be an interesting character to have in the MCU because he is actually a hero who was retconned into existence. The Sentry is Robert Reynolds, who was revealed to be a drug addict that was looking for a fix when he stumbled upon the Golden Sentry serum, and accidentally basically became a hero. Unfortunately, due to the fact that Bob was mentally unstable, he ended up not just becoming the world's greatest hero, but also having another persona who was considered the world's greatest villain, known as the Void. When it was revealed that the Sentry and the Void were both Bob Reynolds, the heroes banded together to help Sentry make the world forget that he ever existed, which basically allowed the Void to also not exist. In so doing, Bob went back to living a relatively normal life, but when his memories began to resurface years later, he would return. Doing so would also awaken the Void within him, and it would once again be revealed, this time more to all of the heroes, that the two, hero and arch nemesis, were actually connected and the same person.
Halfway through into number 5, Archie Andrews. Okay, whoa. Hold on. Before you start raging at me in the comments, just please hear me out. I doubt anyone actually listened to that, but you know what? You may think that this is ridiculous and that I'm just trying to be a disturber. And while that is one of my favorite pastimes, Archie and the gang have actually been canon in the Marvel Comics since June of 1994. Archie Meets the Punisher is a one-shot comic and intercompany crossover written by Bat and Lash, and it was published jointly by Archie Comics and Marvel Comics and features the Punisher mistaking Archie Andrews for a criminal that he's been hunting. Then, when he realizes that he was wrong, he works with Archie to rescue Veronica after she had been kidnapped. And you know what? Since Archie has been a superhero multiple times in his comics, this instantly makes Archie a canon Marvel superhero. But with the comics being used as a plot device as well in Riverdale Season 6 to explain their multiverse, well, those would also by proxy be canon, meaning that Archie, being another Marvel Superman but with a weakness to palladium instead of to kryptonite, is a thing, until they got rid of his weakness. Yeah, that was also a thing. Yeah, that's a pretty unstoppable hero if you ask me. He can't fly, but I mean, again, plot armor.
Number 4. Storm. On part 1 of this list, I talked about how Magneto was unstoppable after Uranos' invasion. How even after seemingly being killed, Magneto just got back up. Well, he wouldn't actually have been able to keep going if it wasn't for Storm and their weird, kinda sexy team up in their fight against Uranos. But this isn't the only time that Storm has become unstoppable. There are a few others that stick out in my memory. There is the time that she was infected by the Children of the Vault's technology, which threatened to overtake her body like a virus. This happened actually pretty recently, within the last few years. Her brush with the deadly tech left Storm comatose, temporarily, until she was revived by the combined efforts of Jean Grey and Emma Frost in their own giant-size X-Men comic, which they shared together. However, Storm was still very unwell after this and left with an estimated 1 month to live. While Krakoa has the capacity to resurrect any fallen mutants, or anyone else that they feel so inclined to bring back at this point, Storm refused to take this easy way out. She would not just lay down and surrender to death. Why? Because Storm is a badass, that's why. And also I think because she felt it undermined the value of life to do so, which she was not here for, and honestly, I want to back her up on that one. Instead, Storm attempted to fight back against the infection, venturing into the often bigger on the inside lab known as the World in her own giant-size issue in an attempt to find something that might help her. Storm and her teammates did succeed in this, separating the virus from Storm and restoring her health, and proving that even in the face of death, Storm generally refuses to back down.
Getting close to the end in number 3, Squirrel Girl. Okay, I mean, there's a whole series called The Unbeatable Squirrel Girl. So I think that you kind of deserve to be on the list. The solo series debuted in January of 2015 and ran for 8 issues and was relaunched in October of 2015 as part of Marvel's all new, all different Marvel branding, and was published through to November of 2019 with 50 issues for a total of 58. Both series were written by Ryan North, but in issue number 4, volume 1, Squirrel Girl literally stops Galactus from coming after Earth by being friends with him. I mean, come on. You're literally unable to sit there and tell me that this doesn't make her deserving of this list. Bro, she didn't even have to fight him, for God's sakes. It's actually insane, dude. She just talked the Devourer of Worlds into not going after Earth. Plus, I know that you all love Squirrel Girl, okay? I may not have been here for a while, okay, but I know that much. I also know that saying anything against the Hulk will get me mean DMs for 3 years, but hey, at least you love Squirrel Girl. And honestly, after reading this issue, I have to say I agree. It's pretty freaking nuts. Yes, I made the pun, alright? You were all waiting for it, I hope.
Number 2, Punisher. The Punisher truly is a man who never backs down. I mean, we even see this bizarrely enough reflected in his interaction in the comics with Archie Andrews, who was also on this list. Punisher is willing to venture kind of into a totally different world in order to apprehend a criminal. And he succeeds, after of course mistaking Archie for the criminal, but that of course is easy to do when you consider how similar he looks to the man that Punisher was after. Punisher is so committed to catching the evildoer, he resorts to food fight tactics. And for Frank Castle, who often prefers to fight with guns, you better bet that's commitment. That's unstoppable when you're willing to throw a cake at someone.
And finally, in at number 1, Scarlet Witch. Considering how the entirety of House of M is meant to be about how she changed reality, I think it's fairly safe to say that she's a powerful hero, even if she isn't a hero all the time. Like in Multiverse of Madness, for example, when she somehow was able to send demons and monsters across different dimensions to attack America Chavez, but couldn't just go to those dimensions herself. Even if she was a villain in this scenario, she was still able to take on the Illuminati from their universe and beat them all fairly easily, proving that not only is she an extremely powerful mutant, whether she's on either side, but also that falling boulders can kill a Captain Marvel, and are also therefore the most dangerous obstacle or weapon in the Marvel universe. The only limit to Wanda's abilities in any incarnation really is her brain, which is like my one gripe with Multiverse of Madness, since her whole point of taking America's powers for herself was in case her kids got sick and died again. But like, you've turned a whole city into your own personal TV show and brought your dead Infinity Stone powered boyfriend back for it. So I think you can handle a little chicken pox if your sons get caught or get whatever you think they're gonna get in whatever universe. But that's also a way for them to explain why she didn't do it, since the movie was all about setting up the premise of incursions. But either way, come on, Scarlet Witch, yeah, it's the thumbnail, I think. I don't know, I actually don't know.
Kicking off the list at number 10, Mr. Sinister. Dr. Nathaniel Essex made his first debut in Uncanny X-Men 221. Now he's not that easy to forget once you take a glimpse at him, because he's kind of terrifying in every way. He's also obsessed with experimenting on mutants, and yes, that includes himself. He was obsessed with Darwin's theory of evolution, but he felt like they were shackled by too many moral constraints. Doesn't that sound lovely? It's off the bat. He couldn't get funding from the Hellfire Club, so he got together a group that he named the Marauders, and then he got them to kidnap people off the streets of London so he can then experiment on them. So dark already, the guy is twisted. He even tried to experiment on his son, who was no longer alive. This guy might be a little bit too twisted for the MCU, but he does bring back dead characters, so maybe he's a blessing in disguise. Number 9, Blastar. Making his first appearance in Fantastic Four issue 62, Blastar once was the ruler of Balur, a planet in the negative zone. The inhabitants of said planet were not a fan of this horrible ruling, so they voted him off the island. They revolted and sent him adrift into the cosmos. Now during that field trip in space, he bumped into Mr. Fantastic, who at that point was already on his way back to Earth with the Inhuman Triton. So Blastar followed them through the portal, teamed up with Sandman, and fought the Fantastic Four. He ended up losing this battle and was sent back to his own dimension, which sounds like a win, but this was only the beginning. He then became king once again, but this time he expanded his territory. It also helped that this time around he stole Annihilus's cosmic control rod. This guy is pretty hardcore, and at one point in the comics, he tried to collect all the Infinity Stones before Thanos. Somebody tell Blastar he's a little bit too late for the MCU. And before we continue on with this list, you know the drill. If you're loving the content, or if you want a part 3, or if you're just liking the curls so far, give us a thumbs up. It really helps us out quite a bit, and then in turn we can give you back as much as we can. You're the best, thank you so much. Right back to this list. Number 8, Shadow King. Making his first appearance in X-Men 117, the Shadow King is a multiversal manifestation of the dark side of the human consciousness spawned by the first nightmare. Doesn't that sound nice already? Sick. Amal Farouk was the leader of the underground syndicate located in the Thieves' Quarter in Cairo, Egypt. He's a powerful mutant who also happens to be a vessel for said Shadow King. Farouk was able to control everybody around him. It's pretty terrifying. He feeds on the shadows of your soul. So yeah, with Marvel veering off into the cosmic side of things, maybe we could see a Shadow King whenever the X-Men come into the picture. Now in the comics before World War II, Amal Farouk worked with Baron von Strucker to try and destabilize Britain's political structure. So maybe he's been there the whole time. I kind of hope he's not though, because he's terrifying. Number 7, the Fallen One. First appearing in Thanos issue 11, the Fallen One was once a Herald of Galactus, who of course we mentioned in part 1. Now the difference between later Heralds of Galactus, this Fallen One was empowered by dark energy instead of cosmic radiation, which was the norm. So in turn he was quite cruel. He was evil enough that Galactus himself had to imprison him. The Fallen One was also a sneaky one. He would often escape and then re-attack Galactus all over again. It was a vicious circle until Star-Lord came in and imprisoned the Fallen One into the Klin, that prison we see in the Guardians of the Galaxy. Now when the Klin was later destroyed during a conflict with Thanos and the Maker, the Fallen One again broke free, went back to Galactus, but this time Galactus teleported him back to Thanos. He's like, no, you go fight him, Mr. Crazy Guy, get out of here. Thanos ended up defeating him, but only because he tricked the Fallen One into igniting a gas giant. At this point, Thanos made him become a herald for himself, right? Might as well. The Fallen One can control black matter, which is a pretty big deal. He can use that matter to enhance his own speed, strength, durability, you name it. You wouldn't see him coming either, because he can travel at the same speed of light. Now we just got Thanos out of the MCU, so let's never bring back his herald either. No thanks. Number 6, Spiral. Rita Wayward made her debut in Longshot issue 1. She's actually a loyal servant to the spineless Mojo that we mentioned in part 1 of this list. But it didn't always start that way, of course not. See, Ricochet Rita was once a professional stunt performer. She became friends with a guy named Longshot who was already from that Mojoverse. She was actually attacked by this insane version of herself called Spiral from the future. They fought, she won, and she thought that was the end of that problem. Now you gotta remember that, because it's for sure not the end. Rita actually decided to follow her heart and go back to that Mojoverse with her new boy toy, Longshot. And then when they get there, they're both captured by Mojo. Longshot's mind was wiped, now forgetting Rita, which is so sad already. But for Rita, it just gets worse. Mojo got his scientists to modify her mentally and physically, so now she has 6 arms, and her hair is also gray, and now, oh, she can also see other dimensions. She was like a twisted little version of Mojo, and she got trained in the dark arts of magic and body modification. And as you may have guessed, that future version of her was just that. Mojo sent her new and improved self to go back in time and attack her past self. It's just a nice loop of trouble.
Halfway through into number 5, Fin Fang Foom. Okay, let's be honest. Most of the supervillains that heroes fight are at least similar to them in some way. Most of Iron Man's villains have some form of robotic suits like his, but less efficient. Spider-Man's are mostly animal themed. However, when Iron Man went up against an actual fucking dragon, we all seemed a little bit confused. That's Fin Fang Foom for you, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, well, he's not an actual dragon, but for a while, the Mandarin, who was working with Finn, did actually believe that he was a dragon of myths and legend. The two together ended up conquering a third of China, and honestly, that's kinda nuts. However, it was revealed that Finn was actually an alien and that his fellow aliens were coming to conquer Earth, resulting in Mandarin having to team up with Iron Man and War Machine to stop it. I'm sure Mandarin regretted this decision after he found out that, you know, he's an alien. I don't think the MCU is going to introduce Finn, at least yet, but honestly, I don't know anymore with the whole multiverse, and now there's more happening, and like a dragon turns out to be an alien. It's par for the course at this point. But I think that Fin Fang Foom is a little too much for the MCU. In at 4, Ultimo. Like I said last number, most supervillains at least base part of their persona off the hero, because we all know villains just want Senpai to notice them. MatPat, I'm still waiting on you. Getting MatPat to notice me will literally be my supervillain origin story. Anyway, Ultimo is no different. However, he didn't really do this to himself. Ultimo is a giant robot created by an alien race that the Mandarin had taken control of. The cool one, not the actor. First introduced in Tales of Suspense number 76 in 1966, Ultimo only died recently in 2020, Force Works number 3 in in June of 2020. While Ultimo was under his control, however, Mandarin claimed that Ultimo was his own creation. The only thing though that Mandarin actually created, besides changing his programming, was an artificial blue skin for the robot. Yeah. Mandarin utilized Ultimo numerous times against Iron Man, including once in the nation's capital, Washington DC. During that battle, Iron Man trapped Ultimo beneath the Earth's crust, and as a result, the robot meandered through the planet's magma. And you know what that caused him to do? Not melt, but absorb more power. Years later, when Iron Man was in battle with like a rock creature who was called the Earth Mover for some reason in California, Ultimo re-emerged without his blue skin, significantly taller and much more powerful. He vaporized the Earth Mover in a second and destroyed a remote unit of Iron Man, and then went on just destroying everything he could. So safe to say it's probably a little too much for the MCU. Getting close to the end, in at number 3, Count Nefaria. Count Lucino Nefaria was the descendant of a long line of Italian noblemen, and he inherited a vast fortune. If only. Introduced in Avengers number 13 in 1965, damn, these guys are old, Nefaria was fascinated with technological advances, and throughout his life commissioned scientists to create inventions that were far in advance of their current scientific standing. After allowing himself to be experimented on though, Nefaria was granted absurd levels of super strength, speed, and energy projection strong enough to make him a danger to any and all superhero teams. That's why Nefaria was introduced as a generic Marvel Universe villain in the Avengers instead of just an Iron Man rogue, and has had several run-ins with both the Avengers and the X-Men. And while we've had some powerful adversaries in the MCU, I think that at this point, the super strong, fast, and energy projecting Count Nefaria is going to be saved for another Avengers movie at least, or maybe even a new big bad if they get that far. But I think that it's probably going to be a little much. Penultimately, in at number 2, the Mandarin. Okay, so while the Mandarin might technically have been introduced in Iron Man 3, he was used as a MacGuffin. The Mandarin wasn't actually a villain. He was just an actor who was covering up the actions of Aldrich Killian and AIM, since Mandarin's iconic 10 rings hadn't been introduced yet, which is kind of proof enough as to how the Mandarin was too powerful. And then comes the latest MCU installment, Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. You've got to be kidding me. I'm actually upset that they introduced these because it totally ruins the ability to correct the Mandarin. I mean, you can't introduce the correct Mandarin now, unless they end up using the name because they were inspired or something, but at this point it's been so long that it wouldn't really make any sense. The McLuhan power rings grant the Mandarin insane powers, like manipulation of atomic and molecular structures, beams of force, vortex generation, disintegration beams, creating areas of darkness, lighting fires from a distance, mental manipulation, electrical blasts, and intense cold and ice control. How is this not the next big MCU big bad? Because he's too powerful. They literally had to make it Kang, because they're like, oh, we're gonna introduce the 10 rings, but oh no. No. Finally, in at number 1, Temujin. Temujin is actually the son of the Mandarin, who ends up inheriting the 10 rings, which already makes him as powerful as his daddy. However, this in combination with his ability to focus chi to give him super strength makes him even more powerful than his father, even nearly killing Iron Man once and for all, which would have been absolutely insane. So it's safe to say that this guy has to be number 1, since he literally has the same powers as the real Mandarin and then some. Hopefully they don't make this guy into an actor or something ridiculous like that. That seems just sad. How would you feel if they introduced him or any of these other characters into the MCU? And are there any that you think are more powerful than the son of the Mandarin? Because I honestly can't think of any, but be sure you let me know down below. I can hear the comments already. How did you not include blah blah? You have no idea what you're talking about.
Number 10, Iron Man. I mean, Tony is just a man, but he is still a very determined man, and he's willing to put everything on the line when it comes to saving the day or fighting for what he believes in. A few examples of this can be seen from both the comics and the Marvel Cinematic Universe. In the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Iron Man ends up being the one to wear the Infinity Gauntlet, snapping to defeat Thanos as the heroes make their final stand. He knows he won't survive this, but it's up to him in the end to save the day, and he's willing to give his life to stop Thanos and prevent him from once more erasing 50% of the universe's population with a snap. During Civil War in the comics, Iron Man also exhibits how committed he can be to a cause, when he believes the best way to prevent civilian casualties is by basically reigning in superheroes, having them register and in essence work for the government. His beliefs are so strong that while other heroes disagree with his methods, he is willing to go to war over it, starting the first civil war against the superheroes that disagree, who are led by a man who believes in freedom among all else and knows all too well what it's like to be a government pawn. on, Captain America's Steven Rogers. And friends, before I move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we're doing here at Top 10 Nerd and you need more Marvel content in your life, be sure to check out our Top 10 Marvel playlist for that. Number 9. Doctor Strange. Even when Doctor Strange died, he didn't let that defeat him. In Death of Doctor Strange, Strange comes back to investigate his own death and solve his own murder. Well, a version of him does anyways. And the amazing thing is that he also seems to have left clues for his alternate self to solve the murder. In the end, when Clea attempts to call him back before accepting the role of Sorcerer Supreme as Doctor Strange's wife, Strange, however, says he cannot return because he knows what it will cost, and that it breaks basically laws of magic. Despite the fact that Strange is a hero who gets things done, he has also learned how to be unstoppably loyal to the rules of magic. This is probably because he is known to have broken these rules on a few occasions to varying degrees of success, I'd say. Sometimes it works, other times doing so only creates more problems, as we also see in Doctor Strange's journey in regards to his MCU stories and counterparts. In the MCU, Strange was willing to break some rules to help Peter get into school by making the world forget that he was actually Spider-Man. But due to Peter's constant add-ons in regards to who was actually allowed to remember, Strange lost control of that spell, splitting a crack in the multiverse. But alternatively, when facing off against the Scarlet Witch, he did allow himself to use an alternate copy of the Darkhold to dreamwalk in his own alternate universe's corpse, breaking several rules in order to defeat Wanda. Then again, he probably knew, like, this is like, I gotta break some rules here. I'm hoping it'll all work out in the end. I mean, I think Strange knew, like, I could do this and it'll be worth it. Number 8. Captain Marvel. Captain Marvel, aka Carol Danvers' whole motto is basically about being unstoppable. Higher, further, faster, baby. Well, it's about being unstoppable and of course, flying. Carol loves to fly. Even when an alternate version of her shows up on God Emperor Doom's battle world during Secret Wars, where she is given a life that she should seemingly love, this version of Carol becomes suspicious of Doom and ends up rebelling, questioning if what he tells her about the sky is actually true. This lines up perfectly with the type of hero Carol is in the main reality as well. During Secret Wars, the Captain Marvel of Earth 616 was one of the heroes on the Life Raft who had been preserved to the end of the multiverse and rebelled as well against Doom to try and reset the multiverse back to normal, which happens after Reed gets control of the Beyonders' powers, winning them back in a battle against Doom and using them along with the help from his family to rebuild the Marvel multiverse. Aside from that, Carol in the main continuity has also lost her memories multiple times and even died and been resurrected, and she hasn't ever let any of that stop her from doing what needs to be done in terms of heroics. Captain Marvel also happens to be one of the most powerful superheroes out there in Marvel Comics. She's got a ton of combat experience, military experience, pilot experience, and can survive in the vacuum of space. Number 7. Blue Marvel. Blue Marvel is one of the Superman-like characters that Marvel has to offer us. In fact, I would argue of the characters that we have in that category that are like DC Superman, he is one of the most underrated and often understated for how powerful he truly is. Adam Brashear, as he is known, is actually powered by antimatter, in essence becoming a living, breathing antimatter or negative reactor. The antimatter that he harnesses comes from the negative zone, which is why we might refer to him as a negative reactor as an alternate to an antimatter reactor. But he isn't a negative character, just the opposite. He is an amazingly powerful positive character, a superhero. Blue Marvel got his powers way back in the day and has actually been an active hero since the 60s in terms of the comics inner timeline. However, he didn't end up staying as one throughout his history due to the fact that he was black, with President John F. Kennedy heartbreakingly even asking him to retire from heroics because tensions were running high and America just wasn't ready for a black superhero at that time. Fortunately, they're ready now. Which is also great because we need a hero like Blue Marvel who isn't just unstoppable because of his nigh invulnerability, strength, and ability to manipulate energy, but also because he happens to be a super genius as well. And while some might take his temporary retirement as Blue Marvel giving up, really, he was more just biding his time. A decade later, he would once again return to heroics, joining the mighty Avengers of the 1970s. So he also wasn't out for really that long, fortunately. Number 6. Namor. While some might have more power than Namor behind their mighty fists, I would argue that Namor tends to be even more stubborn and determined a lot of the time. He isn't one to back down, and generally a good speech doesn't really cut it for making him stop whatever it is he's doing. Although he also probably wouldn't attack mutant kind since, you know, he is a mutant. But then again, if mutant kind did something to harm Atlantis, he might. Namor is a mutant, but first and foremost he is a ruler, believing in fighting for his people and their underwater nation. Case in point, when Krakoa first emerged and he was actually approached to join and acknowledge the country, but he decided to reject their offer to join the nation as a mutant. Although I imagine Atlantis would still recognize Krakoa, but I can't remember for certain if that's been mentioned in anything that I've read. Let me know in the comments if you know if Atlantis has acknowledged Krakoa yet. Namor is also in his own right a powerhouse, and while he might not be as well known for his strength as someone say like the Hulk, he also has shared a place on the Defenders team, with him proving how undeniably powerful he is to have earned that place. In fact, the Defenders remains one of the most powerful teams at Marvel, so typically anyone who makes the cut should be considered pretty OP.
But coming in after that, number 5, Wally West. It almost feels rude to put Wally West here over Barry Allen, but in a lot of ways, Wally is arguably stronger than Barry is. Wally is the fastest of all the Flashes, only maybe rivaled by Barry himself, but Wally is arguably the fastest person that has ever existed. Just look at some of his feats. He was fast enough to easily break the barriers of speed and be the first person to enter the Speed Force. He was able to save and carry over 500,000 people 35 miles away from a nuclear explosion that had already detonated, including the people who were at ground zero, and he did it in only 0.0001 microseconds, which if you don't know is 1/100 billionth of a second. Do you know what that means? That means Wally West had to be moving at 13 trillion times the speed of light. He can move so fast that time itself appears to stand still. He was able to outrun death itself, for crying out loud. My favorite version of Wally West though is from the Kingdom Come Elseworld story, where he becomes this being who is barely even tangible. He moves around Coast City, I believe, being at almost all places at the same time. He basically became the Speed Force. Wally West is absolutely broken. Number 4, Wonder Woman. Gifted with the powers of the gods, Wonder Woman has many of the same abilities that Superman has, including strength, speed, and durability. However, Wonder Woman's Amazonian training sets her a little bit apart as an amazing warrior. It's been debated for years whether Diana could beat Superman in a fight, and while she's shown to be capable of hurting him at the least, she doesn't have the same raw power. Instead, Wonder Woman dominates her opponents through a combination of her special abilities, superior tactics, and special equipment gifted to her by the gods. But she has been elevated beyond even that. When Diana was empowered with the World Forge and the anti-crisis energy at the end of Doom War / during Death Metal, she had enough power to shake stars and phase throughout time through sheer strength. She had displayed the ability to shrink an entire planet and was able to link everyone together and restore their memories as one history, as in of all DC's continuity. She had cosmic awareness, was able to see multiple events during the war against the Batman who laughs at once, as well as precognition and retrocognition. She was crazy powerful for that little bit of time. And at number 3 is Dr. Fate. Dr. Fate is like DC's Sorcerer Supreme. There have been a handful of people over the years who have taken on the name, slapped on the powerful Amulet of Anubis, Cloak of Destiny, and Helmet of Fate, and been an agent of the Lords of Order, who govern raw magic in the universe. Kent Nelson was the original one, given his powers by Nabu, one of the Lords of Order. Now without the powerful artifacts, Kent was given superhuman powers to make him more suitable for the Helmet of Fate, so he has telekinesis, flight, invulnerability, and superhuman strength. But when he has the actual helmet, his telekinesis has been strong enough to move an entire planet into the sun, which is just a wild level of power and shows just how much power the helmet grants its user. This ancient helmet is apparently the most powerful magical artifact the world has ever known. It's the source of the Dr. Fate identity, and while its power and the things it can do has changed in some small and not so small ways over the years, some of the things it has done include granting its wearer enhancements to their intelligence. It has given them elemental control over water, wind, earth, lightning, and fire. Of course, telekinesis, like I said, but also invulnerability, superhuman strength, magic sense, astral projection, clairvoyance, chronokinesis, dimensional travel, divination, eldritch blasts, energy constructs, force fields, healing, illusions, invisibility, magnetic field manipulation, hypnosis, molecular reconstruction, necromancy, resurrection, telepathy, teleportation, biofission, and then of course, divine empowerment. But you get what I'm saying, right? Number 2, Dr. Manhattan. John Osterman was a nuclear physicist who found himself trapped inside of an intrinsic field experiment chamber, which completely removed his intrinsic field, tearing him apart and completely vaporizing him. But over the next few months, he began to reform himself, starting as a disembodied nervous system, circulatory system, and then with a skeleton and muscles, and then finally, after trying multiple times, he appeared fully. Tall, muscular, hairless, and glowing blue. Now, John sees the past, present, and future all at once, but it's not just his perception of time. He even figured out how to see the timelines of others and even possible timelines. He is basically nigh omniscient with an understanding of the universe on a cosmic scale. It's hard to even describe what his powers actually are. His powers and knowledge give him the ability to travel through time, and he has completely fractured the timeline into infinite alternate realities existing in all of them at the same time, or simultaneously, if that makes more sense. John possesses electrokinesis and elemental control, creating oxygen and water out of literally nothing. He perceives and understands things that no human brain could ever hope to. He has such a control over energy that he can even create life and accelerate evolution. He can manipulate matter to make himself and others intangible, alter his size, regenerate himself, disintegrate others, and cause molecules to accelerate and explode. His manipulation of space, time, and reality is what ultimately caused the New 52. He is a god in DC Comics. And finally, in at number 1, the Spectre. A lot like Dr. Fate and the Helmet of Fate, the Spectre isn't really one person. The Spectre itself is actually a cosmic entity and is the physical manifestation of God's vengeance on Earth. But this spirit, or entity, needs to be permanently bonded to a human soul in order to manifest itself. Jim Corrigan, a fallen Hal Jordan, and then Crispus Allen have been the main 3 humans to be the host for the Spectre. Now, being God's spirit of vengeance, you can probably guess that the Spectre is one hell of a capable being, and you're not wrong. Spectre has the power to do pretty much anything. The Spectre is nigh omnipotent. He has the capability to alter reality, literally erasing people from existence. He can alter his size to grow to any height. He can fire off mystical blasts of eldritch energy, and he has vast magical capabilities that allow him to cast spells to do pretty much anything else he wants to do. His wiki even says that his superhuman strength can, quote, be as strong as it needs to be, which I don't know why that matters. Kind of feels like a little pointless when he can literally alter reality and only be harmed by mystical and divine means, but yeah, just work here. The Spectre has infinite energy, has held apart 2 universes, can judge any reality in any dimension, and has the power to tear down heaven and hell. You can't really beat that.